Chapter 1608. Lin Tian and the others were stunned. Although they had vaguely sensed that Wu Yi's cultivation level was very strong, they didn't expect it to be that strong. She was already a half-step divine emperor. A half-step divine emperor. She was only half a step away from the divine king realm and becoming a real divine emperor. Yeah! Little Taichu's big eyes were very bright. She looked very happy. She could destroy the mystic region easily. And Shui Shui swallowed. In the center of the Hell Blood Pool, Hell's subduing Arrow King looked at Wu Yi with surprise. He was shocked by Wu Yi's strength. However, the surprise disappeared in the blink of an eye. His blood-red eyes became even more profound. A ray of light intertwined in them. Human, you're very special. I'll make an exception and give you a chance. Why don't you join Hell? If you join Hell, you'll shine even brighter. Your name will shake the heavens and dominate the world. It'll be easy. He looked at Wu Yi. Lin Tian's expression changed. An ancient expert from the primordial antiquity era, one of the 11 dominators of Hell's macro world, was inviting Wu Yi to join Hell. Wishing Crocodile bared his teeth and cursed. You want Wu Yi to betray her tribe? Stop daydreaming! Daydreaming! Little Taichu agreed. Subduing Arrow King glanced at Wishing Crocodile indifferently. His eyes fell on Little Taichu for a moment, then on Wu Yi. Choose to join Hell and you can live today. In the future, you can reach the peak of cultivation. If you refuse, you'll be reduced to dust here. He looked at Wu Yi and said, It's a pity for someone like you to die. After recovering from his shock at Wu Yi's strength, he once again became calm and indifferent, as if everything was under his control. And Shui Shui felt a little uncomfortable when he saw the other party's attitude. Even though he knew that the other party was a legendary ancient existence who was at the peak of the deity emperor realm back in the day, he still couldn't help but grumble. Sister Wu clearly crushed your body several times. You're being suppressed. How dare you speak in such a high and mighty tone? Concealed Arrow King naturally heard in Shui Shui's mumbling, but his expression didn't change at all. He didn't care at all. His gaze fell on Wu Yi. Human, what is your choice? Buzz! Gentle light intertwined in this space. Wu Yi was still very quiet. Her delicate palm pointed at Concealed Arrow King. Immediately, more blades of light appeared around Concealed Arrow King, attacking him from different angles. Concealed Arrow Emperor raised his hand. The blood pool in Hell boiled. Bloody light shot up into the sky and formed a solid defensive screen in front of him. It seems that you have refused. What a pity, he said. As soon as he finished speaking, the huge Concealed Arrow Palace rumbled and started shaking. Inside the Concealed Arrow Hall, mystical Dao inscriptions appeared one after another, instantly interweaving into a huge divine formation. There was a vast aura of life circling around it, but there was also an extremely dense aura of death lingering in all directions. The two opposing and contradictory fluctuations blended together, turning this place into a huge ocean of life and death in the blink of an eye. Lin Tian and the others all trembled. As the mystical patterns appeared, the power of life and death surged. It was as if it could rule over the life and death of all living things. Even the sky changed color. Could this be? Lin Tian felt a chill run down his spine. Eternal divine Tao, life and death. Concealed Arrow King stood in the center of the blood pool. His eyes were deep and his expression was indifferent. All 11 palaces of Hell are imprinted with the eternal divine Tao by the Holy King. This is enough to destroy everything. Chills ran down Lin Tian's spine when he heard this. Sure enough, it was as he'd guessed. The markings of the Tao here contained the eternal energy of the laws of life and death. And Shui Shui and the others also felt a chill run down their spines. The eternal divine Tao was a power that surpassed the divine Tao. Normal means couldn't possibly block it. No wonder that old bastard dared to speak to Miss Wu Yi in such a lofty manner even though he was clearly crushed by Wu Yi. It turns out that this place has a flawless divine formation imprinted with the eternal divine Tao of life and death. Wishing Crocodile gritted his teeth. The divine formation of life and death circled around the entire concealed arrow palace. The power of the eternal divine Tao of life and death surged violently. Crimson light wove around concealed arrow king. His eyes were still fixed on Wu Yi. "Human," he said coolly, "you're truly extraordinary. I cherish talents, so I'll give you one last chance. Brand yourself with the seal of hell and join hell. Otherwise, you'll be reduced to a bloody dust by the eternal divine Tao of life and death, just like everyone else here." As he spoke, he seemed to be displaying his might. In this place, the life and death divine matrix in the concealed arrow hall trembled. In an instant, it emitted an even more astonishing power of life and death. Wu Yi looked at concealed arrow king and lowered her raised right hand. Her expression was as calm and peaceful as ever. Concealed arrow king's expression darkened at her demeanor. "You've given up on the last chance I've given you. Then die and be reduced to dust along with everyone else," he said coldly. The divine formation of life and death trembled even more vigorously. Boundless eternal divine Tao of life and death pressed down on Wu Yi. At the same time, it enveloped Lin Tian and the others. "It's over! It's over! It's over!" Wishing Crocodile couldn't help but howl. Lin Tian couldn't help but grit his teeth. The eternal divine Tao of life and death was almost unstoppable. Were they going to die here? He tilted his head and looked at Wu Yi. Wu Yi was still very calm. She didn't show any emotion in the face of the eternal divine Tao of life and death pressing down on her. A glimmer of light flashed in his gentle eyes. The space in the concealed arrow palace seemed to freeze. The eternal divine Tao of life and death pressing down on them all stopped. Then they all shattered with a sizzling sound. Even the divine formation of life and death in the concealed arrow palace collapsed in the next moment. This, Lin Tian's expression changed. And Shui Shui, Wishing Crocodile, and little Tai Chu were also shocked. The eternal divine Tao of life and death pressing down on them, and the divine formation of life and death were all destroyed in an instant. The two men and two beasts looked at Wu Yi in unison. Clearly, they knew that Wu Yi was responsible for the destruction of the eternal divine Tao of life and death. Lin Tian, in particular, had clearly seen a strange light flash in Wu Yi's eyes when he looked at Wu Yi just now. At the same time, on the platform at the very center of the Hell Blood Pool, Concealed Arrow Emperor's expression truly changed when he saw Wu Yi. He couldn't hide his astonishment. "Space? You actually control space, that eternal divine Tao of life and death!" A faint light flashed in Wu Yi's eyes just now. She'd completely frozen the eternal divine Tao of life and death, then shattered the eternal divine Tao of life and death. The eternal divine Tao of life and death hadn't been very strong in that instant. Ordinary people wouldn't have been able to detect it, but Concealed Arrow Emperor still sensed it. After all, he was no ordinary person. He was Concealed Arrow Emperor of Hell, a peak divine emperor back in the day. "What?" Lin Tian, and Shui Shui, Wishing Crocodile, and little Tai Chu all paled at Concealed Arrow Emperor's words. The known Taos in the world were, in ascending order, the Great Tao, the Immortal Tao, the Divine Tao, and the Eternal Divine Tao that surpassed the Divine Tao. Amongst them, there were a few thousand Grand Taos, Immortal Taos, and Divine Taos. However, there were merely 3 Eternal Divine Taos, and they were time, space, and life and death. Amongst these 3 Taos, time was the first, space was the second, and life and death was the third. The 2 humans and 2 beasts were stunned. Wu Yi had actually controlled space, the second most powerful eternal divine Tao. That was a power that surpassed life and death. Rumor had it that space was a weapon wherever one looked. Space was one's body. Among the known Taos, only time could suppress space. He actually controls space. Seriously. Lin Tian smiled wryly. In terms of Tao, doesn't that mean he's even stronger than that Holy King Concealed Arrow spoke of? That Holy King is the Lord of Hell, isn't he? Wishing Crocodile couldn't help but gasp. So powerful. So powerful. And Shui Shui's admiration for Wu Yi deepened. Yi is so amazing. Little Taichu was overjoyed. Wu Yi rubbed the little guy's head, then looked at Concealed Arrow Emperor. Eternal Divine Tao Space. Very good. Human, you are indeed extraordinary. Concealed Arrow Emperor met Wu Yi's gaze with an icy glare. He glanced at little Taichu on Wu Yi's shoulder and said coldly, "You were able to rescue the royal family of immortal spirit from my blood prison without anyone noticing. That was also because of space, wasn't it? How could I have misjudged you back then?" Lin Tian's expression changed slightly. "I see," he murmured. He hadn't even seen Wu Yi attack back then. Little Taichu had been moved out of Concealed Arrow Emperor's cage by Wu Yi without anyone noticing. So it was because of space. Wu Yi had ignored the blood prison and moved the little guy closer with space. Wu Yi's gaze was calm. When he looked at Concealed Arrow Emperor, a faint light flashed, and the space around Concealed Arrow Emperor immediately distorted. Concealed Arrow King was no ordinary person after all. He immediately dodged to the side. However, he had only taken a single step when he slammed into an invisible spatial barrier and was sent flying. Dense cracks immediately appeared on his sturdy body as bright red blood seeped out from them. After he was sent flying, his body appeared in the distorted space from before in the blink of an eye. A strong spatial force surged and swallowed him in an instant. Poof! Blood splattered everywhere. His sturdy body was directly crushed by the distorting power of space. Boom! The power of blood and evil intertwined. Ambush Arrow King reformed his body in the blink of an eye. He glanced coldly at Wu Yi. With a wave of his hand, he absorbed all the blood in the blood pool into his body. Then, he drove the ambush arrow drum out of the ambush arrow palace and fled into the distance. Chapter 1609. Concealed Arrow King was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he was already far away. Hell's Concealed Arrow King is running away? And Shui Shui's eyes widened. The legendary super-ancient existence, Hell's Concealed Arrow King, had abandoned the Concealed Arrow Palace and chosen to flee. In his current state, facing Wu Yi, who can control space, his only chance of survival is to run away. Lin Tian now. That old fart. He was acting all high and mighty just now, but now he's running away like a stray dog. How embarrassing! Wishing Crocodile said, feeling very satisfied. And Shui Shui looked at Wu Yi with even more respect. The legendary Concealed Arrow King of Hell, one of the 11 rulers of Hell, had been so easily forced to flee by Wu Yi. This was enough to shake the heavens. Whoosh! His voice pierced through the air. Concealed Arrow King's aura of evil and bloodthirst intertwined around him. In the blink of an eye, he was already extremely far away. Wu Yi didn't make any moves to stop him. He simply looked in the direction Concealed Arrow King had fled in. In the next instant, a muffled sound came from that direction. Concealed Arrow King's figure was immediately sent flying back. He landed with a thump inside the Concealed Arrow Palace. Hum! As Wu Yi's gaze swept past, space distorted and sharp spatial blades manifested. With the force of 10,000 swords, they mercilessly slashed at Concealed Arrow King, who had fallen into the Concealed Arrow Palace. Immediately, the entire subduing arrow hall began to tremble with a rumbling sound. Cracks appeared in many places. Shatter! A low roar sounded. Blood gushed out from where Concealed Arrow King had been attacked by the spatial blades. This was the blood of Hell's blood pool. It corroded everything and turned into a blood giant. As Concealed Arrow King growled, he forcibly pushed aside the dense spatial blades. Then, the blood giant couldn't hold on any longer, and shattered with a hiss. So! The Concealed Arrow King's body was covered in cracks, and it was obvious that he had suffered serious injuries. He glanced coldly at Wu Yi, then turned the Concealed Arrow drum into a streak of blood-red light and fled into the distance once again. He knew that he was not in his peak condition, and there was no way he would be a match for Wu Yi, who had mastered the laws of space, in a head-on confrontation. Fleeing was the wisest choice. His speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye, he was already extremely far away. Wu Yi was very quiet and didn't move at all. She only looked in the direction Concealed Arrow King had fled in. Wherever his gaze passed, space froze, twisted, and shattered. Concealed Arrow King's escape route was sealed off. Pooh! A sharp spatial blade swept out, cutting it into pieces. Concealed Arrow Death Song! Concealed Arrow King's soul was immortal. Before he could reform his physical body, a chilling voice came from his soul body. Instantly, the concealed arrow drum vibrated, and the faint sound of the drum rang out again with the power to destroy souls. It was extremely frightening. But in the next moment, Concealed Arrow King screamed in pain. The concealed arrow death song he'd used was isolated in a narrow space by the invisible laws of space. It bounced back and acted on his own body, causing him to be severely injured. This is the laws of space. It's just like the legends. Space is a weapon of destruction as far as the eye can see. There's nothing it can't do. This is... Whooshing Crocodile couldn't help but shudder. On the side, Lin Tian was also moved. Now Wu Yi was merely standing by the side, not moving at all. Just a simple glance was enough to injure Concealed Arrow King so badly that he couldn't even escape. Even the destruction Concealed Arrow King had unleashed was blocked by the law of space, which then backfired on Concealed Arrow King. Wu Yi's means were truly terrifying. "Break for me!" Concealed Arrow King roared. The sound of the concealed arrow drum stopped, and the blood-red light shone brightly. Concealed Arrow King once again summoned the hell blood pool in his body, using the majestic power contained in the pool to protect himself. He barely managed to block the power of space and melted into the void to escape. In the blink of an eye, he was nowhere to be seen. Even his aura disappeared without a trace. However, it was only for a moment. Somewhere further away, the void shattered, and Concealed Arrow King's body fell out in a sorry state. There were even more cracks on his body as he was blasted out of the void by the invisible power of space. At the same time, a large area of space blades swept by, cutting him into pieces. "Damn it!" Concealed Arrow King roared. He wrapped his shattered body with his soul and tried to escape again. He had no intention of fighting now. He knew that fighting head-on would be futile. Dodging and running were the best options. Wu Yi just stood there quietly, not moving at all. Wherever his gaze passed, the space moved as if it was his subject, sealing and suppressing all directions. He blocked Concealed Arrow King time and time again, constantly injuring him. Puff! 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 Concealed Arrow King roared. He exploded again and again, splattering blood everywhere. This old thing can still withstand the power of space laws. He's still alive even after suffering so many injuries. Whooshing Crocodile was moved. He's one of the 11 dominators of hell, after all. He was at the peak of the Divine Emperor realm back then. It's not that easy to kill him, Lin Tian now said, but his aura has weakened too much. He's not far from death. Buzz! Divine light intertwined, gentle and pure. The space seemed to have a mind of its own. It moved on its own under Wu Yi's gaze, turning into a destructive weapon again and again, causing the powerful Concealed Arrow King to suffer more and more injuries. "I'll fight you to the death!" Concealed Arrow King roared. There was no hope for escape. At that moment, he used the concealed arrow drum to its limit. The drum sound was no longer as eerie and cold as before. Instead, it was as ear-piercing as thunder. He controlled the concealed arrow drum, turning it into a blinding beam of destructive light that swept toward Wu Yi. However, in the next moment, he trembled violently, and the space around him trembled. In the blink of an eye, it turned into an invisible spatial cage, imprisoning him within. The power of destruction that he had conjured exploded within the spatial cage. Just like the concealed arrow soul song from before, the power of destruction landed on him instead, causing him to be severely injured once again. His body exploded again. The concealed arrow drum was covered in cracks as well. It was like a fragile piece of ceramic that was about to shatter at any moment. Even his divine soul had been severely injured, and his soul energy had been weakened by many times. Buzz! Spatial power surged. This time, it was extremely shocking. It sounded like billions of birds flapping their wings. At the top of the cage, the invisible spatial power took form. It swept out like a white gust of wind, gradually condensing into a white saint sword. It was around 3 meters long. The power of the laws of space was extremely dense. Concealed Arrow King's physical body was formed. He couldn't help but tremble violently when he faced the divine sword. At that moment, he felt the true threat of death. "Human! Stop!" he yelled at Wu Yi in the distance. In his current state, he definitely wouldn't be able to block the divine sword that was formed completely by space laws. He would be killed instantly. Wu Yi didn't show any emotion. Her eyes were calm. The divine sword vibrated and buzzed, about to fall on Concealed Arrow King. However, it was also at this moment that her gaze shifted slightly and landed on another direction not far away. Seeing that, Lin Tian was confused. He asked, "What's wrong, Wu Yi?" And Shui Shui, Wishing Crocodile, and Little Taichu were also confused. They couldn't help but look at Wu Yi. Almost at the next moment, the space where Wu Yi was looking at suddenly cracked, and then it exploded. A vast aura of death surged, and an ancient book rushed out. It was covered with densely packed ancient divine seals, and thick black light and blood light lingered around it. Its aura was terrifying to the extreme. Instantly, Lin Tian and Wishing Crocodile's expressions changed. They would never forget this ancient book. The Book of Life and Death! Lin Tian's eyelids twitched. When he and Wishing Crocodile were dragged into Extreme Yin Temple for the first time, they'd seen this ancient book. It was like an old demon that was about to destroy the world. What? And Shui Shui's eyes widened. This is the Book of Life and Death? Something like this really exists? She knew a lot more about hell than Lin Tian and Wishing Crocodile. However, she didn't know about the existence of the Book of Life and Death. When she heard Lin Tian say the name of this ancient book, she was stunned. Then, she looked at the ancient book. Sure enough, she saw 3 ancient characters on its surface. The Book of Life and Death. Her eyes widened even more. At the same time, Concealed Arrow King, who was trapped in a spatial cage, looked at the Book of Life and Death with delight. Holy King! The Book of Life and Death. Is this the Holy King that Concealed Arrow was talking about? The Lord of Hell? Wishing Crocodile's expression changed. Lin Tian looked at the Book of Life and Death with a grave expression. He thought for a moment and said, "That shouldn't be the case. This Book of Life and Death is the Lord of Hell's divine weapon. A weak strand of his consciousness resides in it. In the sky, the Book of Life and Death intertwined with the light of death. It truly seemed to be the source of death. Splitting life and death space. A hazy voice came from the Book of Life and Death. The ancient book intertwined with the terrifying power of death and rushed toward Wu Yi. Such a scene immediately caused Lin Tian and the others to turn pale. Miss Wu Yi shattered the divine formation of life and death here with her spatial laws. The Lord of Hell's consciousness in the Book of Life and Death sensed the spatial laws and came here to attack? Wishing Crocodile exclaimed. The Book of Life and Death transformed into a ball of light, destroying everything in its path. A hazy voice came again. Space, immortal spirit royalty. Lin Tian's expression changed again. The identity of the little Taichu on Wu Yi's shoulder was also discovered by the Book of Life and Death in an instant. With a rumble, the dark light of the Book of Life and Death surrounded it. The whole world shook as if it was about to collapse. Boom! Chapter 16:10. The sarcophagus looked like it was made of ordinary materials, but the intertwined aura was extremely terrifying, as if it could devour everything. With a bang, the Book of Life and Death was sent flying tens of thousands of feet away. This is? Lin Tian was shocked, and Wishing Crocodile's eyes widened. Back when they were in the 10-direction sky region, they were dragged into the Extreme Yin Hall for the first time and almost died there. At that time, it was all thanks to the sudden appearance of this stone coffin and the battle between it and the life and death book that allowed them to luckily escape. Unexpectedly, now that the life and death book had rushed out, the stone coffin also followed closely behind. After the book of life and death rushed out, the sarcophagus immediately rushed out from the same position. Have they been fighting all these years? Wishing Crocodile said with widened eyes. Lin Tian's expression changed slightly when he heard this. Looking at the current situation, he couldn't help but feel that Wishing Crocodile's guess was very likely to be true. Dozens of years, he muttered to himself. This sarcophagus and the book of life and death had been chasing each other for dozens of years? Various kinds of lights intertwined around the sarcophagus, and a soul shadow was faintly condensed. Its appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but a domineering aura intertwined around it. It moved the sarcophagus and attacked the book of life and death again. Bang! The soul shadow threw a punch and landed directly on the book of life and death. With a bang, the book of life and death was sent flying again, shattering a piece of the void. It seemed as if the world was about to be shattered by it. Wishing Crocodile swallowed his saliva and said, "It's as domineering as before." Lin Tian's eyes flickered. The soul shadow condensed from the sarcophagus was just a remnant soul, but its aura was extremely terrifying. It was countless times more powerful than the Hell's Ambush Arrow King. They couldn't be compared at all. Beside them, Wu Yi's gaze also fell on the soul's shadow condensed from the book of life and death and the sarcophagus. Her expression was still very calm, and there was no change in her expression. Only a faint light flashed in her eyes. At this moment, the aura of death and blood surged. In the distance, the Hell's Ambush Arrow King took the opportunity to shake the ambush arrow drum and break free from the spatial cage because Wu Yi was looking at the soul shadow condensed from the book of life and death and the sarcophagus. "Lord Saint King!" The concealed Arrow King's expression changed when he saw the life and death book being sent flying. However, when he saw the remnant soul condensed from the stone coffin, his eyes involuntarily trembled. He was shocked and furious. Moreover, there was fear in the depths of his eyes. "Nameless?" Hearing concealed Arrow King's voice, and Shui was shocked. She looked at the remnant soul condensed in the sarcophagus, her eyes filled with shock. "That's Nameless? Lin. And Whooshing Crocodile couldn't help but look at her too. He was very surprised by this remnant soul's identity. After all, it wasn't his first time seeing it. And Shui took a deep breath. "I've seen this name in an extremely tattered ancient book. Nameless, the first taboo great god before the primordial age." First taboo great god? Lin Tian's expression changed. How terrifying must this person have been to have such a title? At the same time, he also remembered that when he saw the sarcophagus for the first time, a voice came from the book of life and death. At that time, there were only 3 hazy words. First taboo. This title is a little domineering. Wishing Crocodile's eyes widened. Boom! 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 In front of them, shocking divine power surged. Nameless remnant soul's appearance couldn't be seen clearly. It drove the sarcophagus up against the sky and kept colliding with the book of life and death. Beams of terrifying black light burst out, and the entire world started to crack. Although it's just a replica of the book of life and death and a weak remnant soul, even so, it can't even suppress the remnant soul of a junior. Holy King Luanjuan, you're indeed old. An indifferent voice came. A figure appeared silently in the sky. It was enveloped in black light, and its face couldn't be seen clearly. Only a pair of eyes could be seen, and they were frighteningly deep. Grand Supreme. A hazy voice came from the book of life and death. It was neither happy nor sad. Concealed Arrow King was shocked. He hurriedly bowed to the figure that suddenly appeared in the distance. Grand Supreme Lord. At the same time, Lin Tian, and Shui, and Wishing Crocodile couldn't help but turn pale. Grand Supreme? Isn't that the representative of the heavenly Tao from some ancient era that was made up in unofficial history? Could it be that it exists? How is that possible? They were all shocked. In the sky, Grand Supreme was enveloped in black light. His eyes were so deep that they seemed to be able to contain the entire world. He raised his hand and grabbed at the nameless remnant soul. Before the primordial age, just treat it as if it was destroyed. His huge hand pressed down, and black and yellow light intertwined. It was terrifyingly heavy, and an extremely oppressive aura spread out. The Book of Life and Death was surrounded by endless death aura. Just then, it flipped a page, and a strange ancient seal flew out. It turned into a vortex that could devour everything and engulf the nameless remnant soul. The two unparalleled powers locked down the entire area. Buzz! Suddenly, the sky shook, and dragon patterns appeared in the sky. They turned into a giant dragon that was thousands of feet long and swooped down. It shook off Grand Supreme's huge handprint and the death vortex of the Book of Life and Death. Grand Supreme, Holy King Lun Zhuan, even ancient people like you would team up to fight me one day. You're done for. The sky cracked open, and a slender figure stepped out. He walked calmly to the nameless remnant soul and stood beside it. Countless dragon patterns intertwined around his body. His appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but his aura seemed to be able to suppress the sky. In an instant, Lin Tian's expression changed. Looking at this slender figure, his eyes couldn't help but twitch violently. At the same time, Wush and Crocodile, and Shui Shui, and Little Taichu were all shocked. In the distance, Concealed Arrow King's expression also changed drastically. This person, and you, and Shui Shui looked at the slender figure that suddenly appeared in the sky, and then at Lin Tian. His eyes were wide open. During this period of time when she was together with Lin Tian, she had seen Lin Tian bring out his dragon marks. And now, this slender figure that suddenly appeared in this place, exuding an extremely powerful aura, was actually surrounded by dense dragon marks. Could it be Celestial Venerable Zhanglong? No way! Wishing Crocodile swallowed his saliva. That's right! It's that person! It can't be wrong! Lin Tian's eyes twitched violently. When he first obtained the dragon burial scripture, many images appeared in his consciousness. He had seen Celestial Venerable Zhanglong in those images. The Celestial Venerable Zhanglong he saw back then didn't have the same aura as the slender figure here. However, there was a very similar aura. This aura seemed to be the aura of the origin. There was no way he would mistake it. Junior Zhanglong. In the sky, Grand Supreme's eyes were as deep as black holes. He stared at the slender figure that suddenly appeared. I have to say that you're not bad. Even that battle back then didn't kill you. However, you and that nameless junior are as arrogant as ever. You were lucky enough to survive back then, and your spiritual consciousness has returned after reincarnation. Yet you want to challenge us with that nameless junior again? 2 against 2. It's not biased. The figure with dragon patterns around him said. Lin Tian's eyes flickered even more when he heard Grand Supreme's words. He couldn't help but clench his fists. It really is him! Beside him, Wishing Crocodile's eyes also twitched. Is this really Celestial Venerable Zhanglong of the 9 Celestial Venerables? In the current 10 Directions Celestial Domain, there were 9 famous figures in the history of cultivation. They were called the 9 Celestial Venerables. They didn't expect to see one of the 9 in this place at this time. Celestial Venerable Zhanglong. Soon, their expressions changed again. From Grand Supreme's words, they confirmed that the slender figure in front of them was Celestial Venerable Zhanglong. At the same time, they also heard another meaning. The Celestial Venerable Zhanglong that's well known in the cultivation world of 10 Directions Celestial Domain is the reincarnation of a supreme expert from an even more ancient era. Now, he has recovered his spiritual consciousness and memories. They naturally knew about reincarnation. According to the records in the ancient books, some supreme experts who were severely injured only had a weak spiritual consciousness and remnant soul left. They were so weak that they couldn't recover. Therefore, they would consciously or unconsciously choose to start a new life as a newborn baby. This was the so-called reincarnation. At the same time, there were also some supreme experts who, in order to break through the bottleneck of cultivation and reach a higher peak, would cruelly shatter their own bodies and choose to start a new life as a newborn baby with a complete soul. In order to accumulate soul energy, they would then break through the bottleneck that was once difficult to break through, which was also reincarnation. The difference between the two was that the former might be able to recover their past memories and find their former selves after reincarnation, but they might not be able to recover their past memories and truly start a new life. As for their strength, they might be weaker than their previous life, but they might also be stronger than their previous life. However, as for the latter, as long as one's cultivation reached a certain level or encountered some special stimulation after being reborn, one could definitely recover one's past memories and find one's self. Moreover, one's strength would definitely surpass one's previous life in this life, even if it was just a little bit more. The man and the crocodile were stunned. The celestial venerable Zanlong of the 10 Directions celestial domain was in existence from an even more ancient era. If the 10 Directions celestial domain knew about this, it would definitely shake the cultivation world of the 10 Directions celestial domain. Death Chi surrounded the sky, and the dim light was terrifying. Grand Supreme looked at the celestial venerable Zanlong with deep indifference in his eyes. "You're very bold and courageous, but you're also very conceited and foolish." He walked toward the two and said to the celestial venerable Zanlong, "Whether it was before the primordial antiquity era or now, only your master can fight with us head-on. You and that nameless junior are still far from being able to do that." He walked toward the celestial venerable Zanlong and the nameless remnant soul. His aura surged as if he was the Lord of heaven and earth, instantly suppressing everything. The nameless remnant soul and the celestial venerable Zanlong were like small boats in a stormy sea that could capsize and be annihilated at any time. Lin Tian and the others couldn't stop trembling as if a vast world was swallowing them up. "Before the primordial antiquity era, we weren't as strong as you because we can't compare to you. However, if you think that our cultivation has always been stuck before the primordial antiquity era, I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. Time is passing and eras are changing. Our strength is also rising at a speed that you can't compare to." Chapter 16:11. Celestial Venerate Zanlong's voice was calm. However, with the aura that he exuded, there was a supreme majesty that caused the dark sky to tremble and thunder to rumble. "Celestial Venerate Zanlong, the most powerful person before the primordial age, and he has a master?" Lin Tian and Wishing Crocodile were shocked. In the sky, Grand Supreme's eyes narrowed as he looked coldly at Celestial Venerate Zanlong. He never expected that the junior in front of him had reached such a high level in this era and was no longer inferior to him. His eyes turned even colder after hearing Celestial Venerate Zanlong's last words, but he did not refute it. Instead, an unconcealable murderous intent rose in him. "Your lineage will be wiped out. No one will be able to live." A dim light surrounded his body, as if a blazing flame was burning, as if it could incinerate everything in the world. In the next moment he moved. The dim light around his body expanded again and covered the sky. It pressed down on Celestial Venerate Zanlong and enveloped John Doe's remnant soul beside him. A true dragon formed by dragon tattoos circled around Celestial Venerate Zanlong's body. His face could not be seen clearly, and only a pair of deep eyes could be seen. He seemed very calm. "Your divine consciousness incarnation, Sage King Lun Zhuan's replica of the Life and Death book and the spiritual consciousness in it, as well as Extremine Hall and Subduing Arrow Hall, will all be buried here today." As soon as he finished speaking, the true dragon outside his body roared as if it was a real divine dragon. Its mighty dragon power rushed towards Grand Supreme. "Time has changed. Junior Zanlong, you're getting more and more arrogant. You're just a divine consciousness. So what if your cultivation has surpassed what it used to be? You're still far from it. Do you think you can destroy my incarnation?" Grand Supreme's voice was cold. The dim light and the true dragon tattoos collided. Everything in the surrounding space turned into nothingness and ceased to exist. Lin Tian and Shui were shocked. In this place, the Life and Death book was a replica, John Doe was a remnant soul, and Grand Supreme and Celestial Venerate Zhang Long were divine consciousness incarnations. None of them were their original bodies, but they still had such terrifying power. These guys, Jane, are simply monsters. Whooshing Crocodile's voice trembled. Boom! At this moment, a shocking black light rolled as the nameless remnant soul moved. Suddenly, it emitted an even more shocking aura. It controlled the stone coffin to suppress the Book of Life and Death. In an instant, the surrounding void completely collapsed. The Book of Life and Death exuded a terrifying aura of death. The ancient seal scripts seemed to have come to life. The aura of death was like a huge wave that rushed forward. For a moment, Celestial Venerable Zhang Long's Divine Will Incarnation was up against Grand Supreme's Divine Will Incarnation, and the nameless remnant soul was up against the replica of the Book of Life and Death. This kind of battle, this kind of competition, Jane, is simply... Whooshing Crocodile's heart palpitated. Such a battle was simply too terrifying. Even so, the four of them were either divine sense incarnations, remnant souls, or Saint Tool replicas. Their strength was not even 1/10,000th of the original body's strength. It was simply shocking. Boom! 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 The intense battle shook the entire Extreme Temple. The entire world seemed to be collapsing, as if it would be destroyed in the next moment. Swish! Suddenly, a ray of death light shot out from the Book of Life and Death and entered Concealed Arrow King's body. Destruction of space, destruction of immortal. A hazy voice came from the Book of Life and Death. Concealed Arrow King trembled, then looked surprised. He bowed to the Book of Life and Death from afar. Yes, Lord Sacred King! The next moment, he looked at Wu Yi. His eyes were extremely cold and cruel. Lin Tian was right next to him. He saw the ray of death light fly out of the Book of Life and Death and enter Concealed Arrow King's body. Hearing the voice from the Book of Life and Death, and seeing Concealed Arrow King's cold and cruel eyes, he immediately had an ominous feeling. Almost at the same time he had this ominous feeling, the entire subduing Arrow Hall and Extreme Temple began to tremble. In the distance, Concealed Arrow King's aura surged. An ancient seal appeared between his eyebrows, emitting a terrifying aura of death. In the name of the King's seal, the power of Extreme and the power of Concealed Arrow, gather! Boom! The entire great heaven and earth quaked, as an inexhaustible power of death, blood, and evil rolled and gathered together. Roar! Roar! The roar of death filled the vast 9 heavens. As far as the eye could see, numerous cracks appeared in the void. Numerous armored soldiers flew out, and in the blink of an eye, they gathered into a densely packed area. There were at least a few million of them, and all of them were exuding extremely terrifying fluctuations. The fluctuations of death, blood, and evil were like a terrifying ocean that could destroy the heavens. At the same time, a bell rang. A huge yellow bell flew out from one of the cracks. Ancient runes intertwined on it fell. When the bell rang, Lin Tian and the others all trembled. It was as if their souls were about to shatter. Their wills also weakened in an instant, as if they were about to dissipate. The bell from back then! Lin Tian remembered this bell. When he first entered Extreme Temple, the bell rang from the heavenly palace of death, forcefully pulling in a group of cultivators who were sucked in. The bell from back then was clearly the same as the one from this yellow bell. The only difference was that the bell this time was clearly much louder than the one he had heard back then. Without a doubt, this was definitely a supreme treasure of Extreme Temple. It possessed unimaginable power. Hum! Space shook violently. Strands of strange ancient runes rushed out from the dense cracks, intertwining with the power of the laws of life and death. At the same time, endless power of darkness surged over. The entire Extreme Temple and Concealed Arrow Palace began to boil. In the blink of an eye, this place had truly darkened. A few million armored soldiers, a yellow bell, a dense expanse of divine markings of life and death, peerlessly vast baleful energy, evil energy, and various other terrifying energies had converged together before gradually fusing together to form an extremely shocking fluctuation. The fluctuation was terrifying to the extreme. With the king's seal gathering all the power of extreme temple and concealed arrow palace, with the soul-reaping bell as the core and the life and death runes as the veins, all the power of extreme temple and concealed arrow palace has gathered here and merged into one. It's enough to kill an ordinary half-step great god. King Concealed Arrow's eyes were cruel and his voice was cold. He stared coldly at Wu Yi. Die. As soon as he finished speaking, the ancient seal between his eyebrows glowed. He controlled all the power of extreme temple and concealed arrow palace that had gathered here. It pressed down on Wu Yi with a truly destructive force. It also enveloped little Tai Chu, Lin Tian, and the others. In the distance, at the top of the sky, Celestial Lord Zonglong, who was fighting with Grand Supreme's divine consciousness, immediately abandoned Grand Supreme's divine consciousness clone and stepped toward Wu Yi. At the same time, Wu Ming's remnant soul gave up on the battle of life and death. He controlled the ancient stone coffin and rushed toward Wu Yi. Whether it's the space or the royal family of deity spirit, they're all huge threats. I'll eliminate them all. I won't let you save them. Grand Supreme's voice was indifferent as he stopped Celestial Lord Zonglong. Die. A hazy voice came from the Book of Life and Death. The power of life and death surged out, restraining Wu Ming's remnant soul. The sky shook violently and divine power surged. Celestial Lord Zonglong and Wu Ming's remnant soul were both stopped. They couldn't escape in a short time. Boom! Turbulent destructive energy surged. Millions of armored soldiers, soul-reaping bell, life and death runes, endless power of blood and darkness. At this moment, the power of extreme temple and concealed arrow palace merged into one. It really seemed to be able to destroy everything. In the blink of an eye, Concealed Arrow King controlled this terrifying power and merged it with the concealed arrow drum. He directly pressed down on Wu Yi and the others. Lin Tian and Wu Yi stood together, facing this power that was enough to destroy ordinary half-step divine emperors. They felt chills all over their bodies. And Shui Shui and Wishing Crocodile couldn't stop trembling. Little Taichu stayed on Wu Yi's shoulder. All the hair on its body stood on end. Wu Yi raised her hand and gently rubbed the little guy's head, calming it down immediately. Her hand was delicate and gentle, and her expression was still calm. Her divine will, as gentle as the sound of a zither, floated in all directions. In heaven and on earth, only I reign supreme. Boom! For the first time, a domineering pressure spread out from her seemingly delicate body. The entire sky changed color, and the entire world seemed to have become her domain. A destructive spatial ripple spread out in the boundless space with her as the center. Everything in the entire world came to a standstill in an instant. In the next moment, a light gust of wind blew by, and a series of soft hissing sounds resounded. The millions of armored soldiers, the soul-reaping bell, the concealed arrow drum, the divine crest of life and death, the boundless baleful aura of blood, and the evil aura of Een collapsed in unison, and they transformed into ash and light mist that filled the sky in the blink of an eye. Space, order! Concealed Arrow King's eyes were filled with endless fear. In the next moment, his body collapsed and turned into dust that scattered with the wind. Lin Tian was almost completely stunned. He looked at the picturesque Wu Yi beside him and couldn't swallow a single word. A power that could easily annihilate an ordinary half-step god emperor was actually annihilated by Wu Yi in an instant. Even Concealed Arrow King was annihilated in body and soul. She was only a half-step divine emperor, but she could actually display such terrifying power. This was equivalent to killing a half-step divine emperor with a cultivation of a half-step divine emperor. Moreover, it had only taken an instant. And Shui Shui, Wishing Crocodile, and Little Tai Chu were also stunned. It was as if they had lost their souls and their consciousness. At the same time, Celestial Master Zonglong, the nameless remnant soul, Grand Supreme, and the Book of Life and Death stopped in their tracks and looked at Wu Yi. They were either shocked or trembling. In terms of talent, she's comparable to Master. This Celestial Master Zhanglong lost his composure for the first time. Kill, we must kill her! Otherwise, she'll be the second human king! Grand Supreme's voice was extremely cold. For the first time, he revealed a strong murderous intent. Chapter 16:12. A half-step Divine Emperor could kill a half-step Divine Emperor. Even the ancient Grand Supreme and the Lord of Hell, Saint King Luanzhuan, were shocked. Their murderous intent reached its peak at this moment, and they immediately pounced on Wu Yi. They felt a great threat. They definitely couldn't allow such a person to live. Otherwise, there would be a great disaster in the future. Don't even think about it. Celestial Venerable Zhanglong naturally saw what the Grand Supreme and the Book of Life and Death wanted to do. He immediately stepped forward. The true dragon formed by the dragon markings roared and pressed down on the Grand Supreme and Saint King Luanzhuan with an earth-shattering force. At the same time, the nameless remnant soul controlled the ancient sarcophagus. Its aura instantly soared and it almost turned into a demon god of destruction. It charged towards the Grand Supreme and the Book of Life and Death together with Celestial Venerable Zhanglong, bombarding them with destructive divine light. However, the Grand Supreme and the Book of Life and Death were too fast. They dodged the attacks of the two and went straight for Wu Yi. As the two closed in, a terrifying murderous aura descended, causing Lin Tian and the others to shiver. Just the aura of the two made them unable to move at this moment. Qian Xue, pierce through them! A gentle voice rang out. A jade flute appeared beside Wu Yi. Like a spear, it turned into a bolt of lightning and flew out, covering thousands of miles in an instant. Ka! Pooh! With two soft sounds, the Book of Life and Death was directly pierced through. Then, the Grand Supreme's incarnation's chest was also directly pierced through. They were both sent flying by a strong force. Instantly, the pressure on Lin Tian and Shui disappeared without a trace. They could move again. They were all shocked speechless. Subconsciously, they thought that the Grand Supreme's incarnation and the replica of the Book of Life and Death were stronger than the ones summoned by Concealed Arrow King. They should be comparable to a peak half-step Divine Emperor, and could defeat anyone below the Divine Emperor level. However, they didn't expect that these two ancient existences would be injured by Wu Yi in one move. This kind of fighting strength was beyond the concept of cultivation level. They couldn't imagine or understand how a half-step Divine Emperor could be so strong. At the same time, Celestial Zhanglong was astonished. He looked at Wu Yi, his eyes twinkling. You've surpassed the Tao. Not only did you comprehend it, but you've also mastered it. You're only a half-step godly emperor, and you're already. This powerful existence from the primordial antiquity era was shocked. However, in the next moment, he calmed himself down. His deep eyes looked at the Zenith incarnation and the replica of the Book of Life and Death, who had been injured and pushed back by Wu Yi. He then took a step toward them. Roar! The dragon's roar reverberated through the heavens and the earth. A true dragon that was tens of thousands of feet long circled around his body. It was completely formed by dragon patterns and looked as if it was real. The might of the dragon that was almost tangible was vast and mighty. It immediately enveloped the Taishang sect and the Life and Death book. At the same time, the nameless remnant soul also attacked. All kinds of divine patterns intertwined and turned into divine waves that drowned the Taishang incarnation and the Life and Death book. Boom! That place directly turned into a place of destruction. The entire sky was collapsing. The Taishang incarnation and the Life and Death book had just been injured by Wu Yi when they faced such a destructive attack. They were immediately injured again and were directly blasted from the sky into the ground. Celestial Lord Zhanglong and the nameless remnant soul did not stop. They did not give the Taishang incarnation and the Life and Death book any time to breathe. They directly pressed forward again. For a moment, the two destructive divine powers once again fell on them with a rumbling sound. The momentum was extremely terrifying. Boom! Boom! Two powerful forces surged. The Taishang incarnation and the Life and Death book broke free from the destructive attacks of Celestial Lord Zhanglong and the nameless remnant soul. They were both severely injured. The Taishang incarnation tilted his head and looked at Wu Yi. His deep eyes were even colder, and the murderous intent in them became even more intense. "The Taishang incinerates the world," he said coldly. In an instant, the dim light outside his body became extremely intense, and the entire world collapsed. The turbulent destructive aura was vast and mighty. It was not attacking Celestial Lord Zonglong and the nameless remnant soul. Instead, it was still pressing down on Wu Yi. Obviously, this was not an ordinary attack, but an extremely terrifying magical power. "Dragon bury a world!" A calm voice sounded, and the peerless dragon's roar resounded through the 9 heavens. Celestial Lord Zonglong stepped forward, and 9 true dragons appeared in succession. Each of them was intertwined with an aura that could bury all things. In an instant, they blocked the destructive magical power of the Taishang incarnation that was pressing down on Wu Yi. The two collided and directly exploded, turning the world there into the most primitive chaos. Rotation of life and death. A hazy voice came from the Life and Death book. The power of life and death surged, and the fluctuations of the way and the precepts could no longer be sensed. However, it was still extremely terrifying. The power that it emitted was not inferior to the magical power that the Taishang incarnation and Celestial Lord Zonglong had used. Like the Taishang incarnation, it was not attacking Celestial Lord Zonglong and the nameless remnant soul. It was also pressing down on Wu Yi. Obviously, at this time, in the eyes of these two ancient existences, killing Wu Yi was the most important thing. No name, no beginning. For the first time, the nameless remnant soul spoke, and it was as hazy as the voice that came from the Life and Death book. The ancient sarcophagus behind it shook, and a terrifying aura that could swallow heaven and earth surged out, blocking the magical power of the Life and Death book. With a boom, the two collided in the blink of an eye. The result was like the collision between the Taishang incarnation and Celestial Lord Zonglong's magical power. It directly turned the surroundings into the most primitive chaos, and it was difficult to recover for a long time. "Taishang, Saint King Lun Zhuan, don't waste your energy. You want to kill her with just a divine consciousness incarnation and a wisp of spiritual consciousness in the replica Life and Death book? You're too arrogant. Even if you attack together now, you'll only be crushed by her in the end." Celestial Lord Zonglong's eyes were deep, and his voice was calm. He walked step by step toward the Taishang incarnation, and endless dragon patterns surrounded him, making him seem unapproachable. At the same time, the nameless remnant soul was even more direct. Endless blood rushed out from the ancient sarcophagus behind it, and it instantly turned into a blood river, enveloping the Taishang incarnation and Saint King Lun Zhuan at the same time. It was extremely powerful and domineering. The Taishang's true face couldn't be seen, and only a pair of extremely cold eyes could be seen. A huge demonic shadow appeared behind him, and it went against the sky to attack the nameless blood sea. The endless life and death aura from the Life and Death book bombarded the nameless blood sea together with the demonic shadow behind the Taishang incarnation. Celestial Lord Zonglong stepped forward and formed a seal with one hand. A dragon sword appeared behind him, and it slashed down at the Taishang incarnation and the Life and Death book as if it was going to kill the heavens. Boom! 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 A violent explosion resounded in all directions. The Taishang incarnation and the Life and Death book were completely restrained by Celestial Lord Zonglong and the nameless remnant soul. The four of them collided, and the aura was terrifying. The battle was extremely intense, but Lin Tian and the others were looking at Wu Yi at this moment. Wu Yi was too strong. That kind of strength had exceeded the scope of their understanding. Even Lin Tian, who had always been calm, was shocked to the point of being stunned. Whoosh! A faint light flashed past with pure white light, and it pierced through the Life and Death book and the Taishang incarnation's jade flute. It circled around Wu Yi and turned into a faint light that entered Wu Yi's body, disappearing without a trace. The flute at that time. A faint light flashed in Lin Tian's eyes. It wasn't the first time he saw this jade flute. He had seen it in the 10-direction sky domain. At that time, He had reached the Emperor realm in the Netherworld race's sealed dust domain, and it was difficult for him to pass the Emperor tribulation. Wu Yi took out this jade flute at that time and played a melodious tune, which instantly increased his battle strength by dozens of times. Wishing Crocodile and Little Taichu had naturally seen this jade flute as well. When Wu Yi played the flute to help Lin Tian pass the Emperor tribulation, they were also there. Too powerful! Sister Wu Yi, you're like a god! No, even a god can't compare to you! And Shui recovered from the shock at this moment. She clenched her fists tightly and looked at Wu Yi with excitement and admiration. Facing her burning gaze, Wu Yi gently nodded. Yeah! Little Taichu was extremely happy. It was as excited as in Shui. Its big eyes curved into crescents as it intimately rubbed Wu Yi's cheeks. Wu Yi was very quiet, but when facing Little Taichu, she would always smile and gently rub the little fellow's little head. Wishing Crocodile looked at Wu Yi in shock. It took a few deep breaths before turning around. Then, it whispered in Lin Tian's ear. Kid, are you under a lot of pressure? Lin Tian. He tilted his head and looked at Wu Yi. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. This woman, who he felt so familiar with from the first time they met, really couldn't have a single flaw. Whether it was appearance or strength, they could only be described as perfect. If he really had to forcefully pick out a flaw, in the words of the Violet Fairy, it would be that she was too perfect. Wu Yi tilted her head and looked at him. She didn't say anything. She just looked at Lin Tian very quietly because she could feel that Lin Tianyi was looking straight at her. Lin Tian blushed with shame. Even though he was already used to Wu Yi's reticence, he still felt a little speechless at this time. Nothing. I just feel that you're too powerful. You've mastered the second-ranked Eternal Space Divine Tao, and you can even kill enemies who are a major realm above you. He smiled wryly. Wu Yi's strength deeply shocked him. He really could only smile wryly. Wu Yi looked on quietly. After a pause, she said softly, Your Tao is stronger than mine. Lin Tian's expression changed slightly when he heard this. And Shui and Wishing Crocodile were also moved. When they heard Wu Yi's words, they couldn't help but be shocked. How is that possible? And Shui's eyes widened. As far as she knew, the Eternal Divine Tao was the most powerful Tao. It was divided into time, space, and life and death. Wu Yi mastered the second-ranked Eternal Divine Tao space. Only time was stronger than space. Could Lin Tian have mastered the first-ranked Eternal Divine Tao, time? Lin Tian looked at Wu Yi. He naturally knew that the Tao Wu Yi mentioned was his nameless Great Tao. Do you know what Tao it is? He asked Wu Yi. Yes. Wu Yi nodded lightly. What is it? Lin Tian hurriedly asked. She was the second person who knew what his nameless Great Tao was. He really wanted to know what that Tao was. Wu Yi looked at him. She was very quiet. After a pause, she shook her head lightly. Chapter 16:13. Seeing Wu Yi shake his head, Lin Tian naturally knew that Wu Yi did not intend to tell him the answer. He could not help but frown. Why? He asked. Back then, an old drunkard clearly knew what his Tao was, but he did not tell him the answer. It's not good for you, Wu Yi said. Hearing this, Lin Tian could not help but frown again. However, after thinking about it, he finally sighed slightly and did not ask any more. Although he was very curious about this matter and wanted to know what his nameless Tao Law was, since an old drunkard and Wu Yi did not tell him, they obviously had their own considerations and were doing it for his own good. Next to him, and Shui looked surprised. He looked at Wu Yi for a while and then looked at Lin Tian for a while. It was really unbelievable. Lin Tian's Tao was actually more powerful than space. Wishing Crocodile and Lin Tianyi knew that the Tao Wu Yi mentioned referred to Lin Tian's nameless Tao Law. At this time, they were also surprised like in Shui. It always knew that Lin Tian's nameless Tao Law was very powerful, but it did not expect it to be so powerful. It was actually more powerful than the legendary space. Moreover, these words came from Wu Yi, who could instantly kill a half-step Emperor God. The only Tao that is more powerful than space is time. However, Brat Lin's Tao is obviously not time. Then what is it? It was very surprised. Boom! At the top of the sky, the terrifying divine power was vast and mighty. The confrontation between Grand Supreme, Celestial Venerable Zanlong, Book of Life and Death, and the nameless remnant soul was extremely shocking. The eyes of Lin Tian and the others were immediately attracted. It was really difficult to watch a battle of this level. Boom! 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 The light of destruction was vast and mighty. The four of them were not in their original form, but their strength was shocking. Every time they collided, it was as if they were going to destroy the world. The space formed by the extreme hall and the ambushing arrow hall was originally much sturdier than the space of the immortal region. However, under their battle, it was now extremely fragile. Many places were cracking and crumbling. Bang! A dull thud was heard as the great supreme incarnation was sent flying by the celestial venerate Zanlong. The divine will body became slightly transparent. Grand Elder, you can't do it anymore. Celestial venerate Zanlong's voice was calm. The sky was filled with intertwining dragon patterns. The celestial venerate dragon Zanlong walked slowly, but every step he took caused the sky to tremble. It was as if it was going to collapse in the next moment. The Grand Elder's eyes were deep and cold. He glanced in the direction of Wu Yi, and the murderous intent in his eyes was hard to hide. He had suffered serious injuries after being penetrated by Wu Yi's jade flute. His aura was weaker than Heaven Venerate Dragon Zhang's. He did not say anything. His eyes were cold and indifferent. Once again, a demonic shadow appeared behind him and attacked the celestial venerate dragon Zanlong. At the same time, not far away, the Book of Life and Death and the nameless remnant soul were fighting. All kinds of light of destruction surged, and the aura of death seemed to be annihilating everything. Lin Tian watched the battle from afar. His eyes flickered. These people were really too strong. Just the divine will incarnation, the replica sacred weapon with a wisp of spiritual consciousness, or the remnant soul can have such an aura. How strong are their real bodies? They are definitely in the divine emperor realm. Whooshing Crocodile could not help but tremble. It's terrifying! And Shui Shui shrunk his neck, then looked at Wu Yi and said, However, Sister Wu Yi is still the most powerful. She can kill a half-step divine emperor realm expert in an instant. In the future, she will be able to kill a divine emperor realm expert in the divine emperor realm. She is much stronger than these people. She looked at Wu Yi with admiration. Hearing this, Lin Tian looked at Wu Yi. He could not help but be shocked. A half-step divine emperor realm expert could kill a half-step divine emperor realm expert in an instant. This kind of strength and aptitude was really difficult to describe. He could not find any words to describe it. He took a deep breath and looked at the sky again. He watched Celestial Venerable Zanlong, Grand Supreme, and the nameless remnant soul fight against the Life and Death Book. A battle at this level was very terrifying, but it was also very valuable. For a cultivator at his level, watching such a battle would definitely be very beneficial for his future cultivation. He would be able to comprehend a lot of the true essence of cultivation from it. At the same time, and Shui Shui and Wishing Crocodile also knew this. At this time, they were seriously watching the battle in front of them. Even little Taichu was no exception. Boom! 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 Terrifying divine might roared. The whole sky was collapsing. Both the Extreme Palace and the Subduing Arrow Palace were collapsing. In the blink of an eye, the four of them had been fighting fiercely for more than 6 hours. However, their auras did not weaken much. It was as if their divine might was unlimited. However, even so, the subtle gap between the four of them could be seen by those who were slightly discerning. The incarnation of the Great Supreme and the replica of the Book of Life and Death are at a disadvantage. If they continue to fight fiercely, they will only be crushed. Lin Tian Andao. Whooshing Crocodile nodded and agreed. This is mainly because of Wu Yi's attack. Lin Tian was naturally aware of this. He continued to watch the battle between the four great existences in the sky. Most of his attention was on Celestial Venerate Zhang Long. After all, he possessed Celestial Venerate Zhang Long's dragon burial scripture. Roar! The dragon's roar was ear-piercing and shook the 9 heavens. Dragon marks surrounded the dragon burial scripture, and only his eyes could be seen. They were deep and calm. As he took a step, the dragon marks intertwined with the true dragon and collided with the divine might of the Great Supreme. His body was straight and slender, but his aura seemed to be able to swallow mountains and rivers. With every step he took, the meridian mark of heaven and earth resonated with him. Bang! Once again, the Great Supreme was knocked back, and his body became even fainter. However, there was no anger in his eyes. He was still cold and indifferent, and the dark light around his body was vast and mighty. The dragon burial scripture did not say anything and pressed towards the Great Supreme again. I'll also join in. A cold voice sounded. The peak of the sky cracked open, and monstrous nether energy surged. Another hazy figure stepped out, and his aura was extremely strong. The dragon burial scripture stopped and looked at the person who came. His eyes were still calm. Nether King. As soon as these words were said, Lin Tian, and Shui Shui, and Wishing Crocodile not far away were shocked. Nether King? The Lord of the Underworld? A hint of shock appeared in Lin Tian's eyes. The Underworld, like Hell, was a super big world before the Primordial Age. It was even bigger than the Celestial Realm. It was rumored that it was destroyed before the Primordial Age. No one expected the Nether King, the former Lord of the Underworld, to step into this place. This is a gathering of ancient monsters from the Primordial Age? And Shui Shui widened her eyes. First, it was the Lord of Hell who controlled the Book of Life and Death. Then, it was the first forbidden god before the Primordial Age. Then, it was the Grand Supreme, and then the Dragon Burial Scripture. Now, even the Lord of the Underworld before the Primordial Age had jumped out. This sent chills down her spine. In the sky, endless nether energy surrounded the Nether King's body as if it could devour everything in the world. His gaze fell on the Dragon Burial Scripture, and then he glanced at the nameless remnant soul. Burial Scripture Nameless, you two juniors are not bad. You didn't die back then, and now you've reached such heights. As he spoke, he took a step toward the Dragon Burial Scripture and the nameless remnant soul. The nether light turned into a light that could end all things and pressed down on the Dragon Burial Scripture and the nameless remnant soul. Back then, you destroyed my underworld. Today, I'll cripple your divine consciousness and remnant souls to collect some interest. As soon as he said that, Lin Tian and the others were shocked again. The ancient underworld before the Primordial Age, which was even bigger than the Celestial Realm, was destroyed. It was actually led by the Dragon Burial Scripture and the Nameless? Boom! The nether light rolled and turned into a huge wave of the nether sea. It pressed down on the Dragon Burial Scripture and the nameless remnant soul. This nether light was extremely terrifying. It was as if the underworld before the Primordial Age had appeared and pressed down. The aura was extremely terrifying. Buzz! Silver divine light descended from the sky, and a huge divine diagram drew out from the void. It intertwined with the aura of sealing all things and immediately met the Nether King's endless nether light. In the blink of an eye, it dissipated and then pressed down on the Nether King without slowing down. This is... Lin Tian's pupils shrank. Wishing Crocodile's eyes widened. For symbol seal? The silver divine diagram broke through the Nether King and appeared in front of him in the blink of an eye. The Nether King raised his hand and smashed it into pieces with a slap. Then, he raised his head and looked at the place where the silver diagram drew out. There, another slender figure stepped out. His entire body was intertwined in silver divine light. Like the Dragon Burial Scripture, his face couldn't be seen clearly. Only a pair of deep eyes could be seen. Feng Xin! The Nether King said in a deep voice. His eyes were cold. At the same time, the Book of Life and Death vibrated slightly. The Grand Supreme's eyes turned cold. Before the Primordial Age, the Dragon Burial Scripture and the Nameless were not as powerful as them. However, the person in front of them was different. He was their formidable opponent before the primordial age. Senior brother, the dragon burial scripture said softly to the slender figure that appeared. This scene shocked Lin Tian and Wishing Crocodile again. That is Feng. Feng Xingtianzuan, right? He is also a reincarnation? He is the dragon burial scripture's senior brother? Wishing Crocodile's eyes widened. Then, he came up with a ridiculous guess. Are the 9 celestial masters all reincarnated? Moreover, they belong to the same lineage? Lin Tian looked at the slender figure that appeared in the sky. He did use the 4-symbol seal. Moreover, the Nether King said the word Fengshen. Without a doubt, he was one of the 9 celestial masters, Fengshen Tianzuan. At this moment, the dragon burial scripture, who was also one of the 9 celestial masters, called him senior brother. It was easy for people to think that the 9 celestial masters belonged to the same lineage. And Shui also widened his eyes and looked at the dragon burial scripture and Fengshen Tianzuan in the sky. Then, he looked at Lin Tian with an incomprehensible expression. Why do you know all their techniques? Chapter 16-14. And Shui stared at Celestial Venerable Zonglong, Fengshen Tianzuan, and then at Lin Tian. Lin Tian actually knew the techniques of these 2 ancient existences. Moreover, it just so happened that these 2 ancient existences were from the same lineage, and they were fellow disciples. She truly felt that it was quite strange. I just happened to learn them. Lin Tian now. He looked at the top of the sky, and his gaze fell on Fengshen Tianzuan and Celestial Venerable Zonglong. These 2 legendary figures of the 10 Directions celestial domain appeared in this place together. Both of them had extraordinary backgrounds, so he naturally paid attention to them. Almost as soon as he looked at the sky, Fengshen Tianzuan's gaze moved and looked in his direction. His face was hard to see clearly as it was very blurry. A strange light flashed in his eyes, and he seemed to be frowning slightly. Senior brother, what did you see? Celestial Venerable Zonglong looked at Lin Tian and then at Fengshen Tianzuan. He transmitted his voice to him. Fengshen Tianzuan shook his head and retracted his gaze from Lin Tian. He looked at Netherworld King, Taishang, and the Book of Life and Death. In the next moment, with a boom, a powerful divine power rushed out from his body. He didn't say anything and walked toward Netherworld King, Taishang, and the Book of Life and Death. 1. The silver 4-symbol seal rushed out from behind him, covering the sky and the sun. At the same time, it enveloped Netherworld King, Taishang, and the Book of Life and Death. Netherworld King snorted. Vast underworld lights surged, and underworld beasts appeared all over the sky. They roared at the sky and rushed toward Fengshen Tianzuan. Taishang and the Book of Life and Death attacked at the same time. The black light and the aura of death intertwined and pressed down on Fengshen Tianzuan. Fengshen Tianzuan was fighting 1 against 3. His silver 4 symbols Tao diagram suddenly split into 3. All kinds of strange patterns were intertwined on it, and they pressed toward Netherworld King, Taishang, and the Book of Life and Death. Then, the 3 divided into 4 layers. Each layer was intertwined with the terrifying power of sealing and annihilation. It seemed to be able to seal and suppress heaven and earth. Netherworld King, Taishang, and the Book of Life and Death seemed to know how terrifying this supernatural power was. Although the 3 attacked Fengshen Tianzuan at the same time and had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers, they didn't dare to be careless at this time. After unleashing all kinds of killing lights, the light of the divine power was stronger than before, and the space of the void all collapsed. Space collapsed. Boom! All types of destructive auras pervaded the air. All types of radiance extended outwards, divine might oppressing the world. And Taishang, and Book, Taishang, and Taishang, and the Taishang, and the Taishang, and the Taishang, and in Taishang, and the Taishang, and in the Taishang, the Taishang, and the Taishang, and the Taishang and the Book and Taishang Death, Taishang, and the Taishang and the Tais in it. And Tawi, it, It. Then, the four symbols Tao diagram that had fused into one split into three divine diagrams again, attacking the Taishang and the other two. As expected of Feng Shun Tianzuan. The way he used the four symbols seal is really amazing. Whooshing Crocodile looked at Feng Shun Tianzuan in the sky, and his eyes could not help but flicker a little. Then, he paused and said, "However, in terms of understanding and application of this technique, it seems that he is still lacking compared to your abnormal master." "I do feel that way." Lin Tian felt the same way. At this time, Feng Shun Tianzuan's four symbols seal was incomparably frightening. The four symbols seal was also very stunning. He was far from being able to compare with Feng Shun Tianzuan's four symbols seal. However, it felt like even the powerful Feng Shun Tianzuan was far behind an old drunkard in terms of understanding and application of the four symbols seal. This surprised him a little. "That's why I said that your master is simply abnormal. His understanding and application of other people's techniques have surpassed others, and it's not just by 1 or 2 levels. The five-element crocodile said. "This feeling is as if Empyrean Divine Seal learned the four symbols seal from that freakish master of yours, and he didn't learn it completely." Buzz! Silver divine light intertwined, and the four symbols seal covered the sky. The tyrannical aura of the seal covered every corner. As the divine light intertwined and flashed, the deathly aura of many places in the gloomy and dark Extremine Temple and subduing Arrow Palace instantly dissipated, like small ice cubes encountering a monstrous fire. They melted in the blink of an eye, and then evaporated. So strong! And Shui Shui trembled. "Yeah." On Wu Yi's shoulder, little Taichu also opened his eyes wide. Wu Yi was very calm from beginning to end. In this world, there was really nothing that could make her so emotional. Boom! At the peak of the sky, Feng Shun Tianzuan was fighting against Grand Supreme, Lord of Hell, and the Book of Life and Death. The four symbols seal was cast by him, and it could be said to be amazing. It was just a simple Tao diagram, but it could always produce unexpected power. For a moment, Grand Supreme, Lord of Hell, and the Book of Life and Death, these three ancient existences, were all tied up by him. No name, no beginning. The nameless remnant soul spoke again, and drove the stone coffin forward, filling the sky with black light. Celestial Venerable Zhang Long didn't rush forward, but at this time, he retreated dozens of feet. Then, without any obvious movement, the sky was suddenly filled with dragon patterns, and they quickly disappeared into the void, disappearing without a trace in the blink of an eye. Seeing this scene, Lin Tian moved the dragon burial scripture in his body, and the eye of Delusion Breaker involuntarily opened. He was immediately moved. He saw that the dragon patterns that disappeared were now surging toward every corner of Extremine Temple and subduing Arrow Palace from the void. Each dragon pattern seemed to be the source of destruction, containing the power of annihilation. "Is this the dragon burial array? To completely destroy Extremine Temple and subduing Arrow Palace?" His heart skipped a beat. Extremine Temple and subduing Arrow Palace were 2 of the 11 holy palaces of Hell, and it was difficult for an ordinary Emperor God to completely destroy them. Otherwise, these 2 holy palaces wouldn't have been able to survive when Hell was destroyed. However, it was also because of the battle that destroyed Hell that the 2 divine palaces had suffered a lot of damage. Now, even though Celestial Venerable Zhang Long was just an incarnation of his divine will, he could rely on the dragon burial scripture, a peerless divine art, to spread the dragon patterns all over the corners of the Extremine Temple and the ambushing Arrow Hall to form a dragon burial array. After that, he could definitely destroy the 2 divine palaces of Hell. Although he had heard from Celestial Venerable Zhang Long that he was going to destroy Extremine Temple and subduing Arrow Palace, he couldn't help but be surprised when he saw Celestial Venerable Zhang Long putting his plan into action and laying a dragon burial array in the large space that was built by Extremine Temple and subduing Arrow Palace to destroy them. While he was watching Celestial Venerable Zhang Long interweave dense dragon patterns to every corner of Extremine Temple and subduing Arrow Palace, Celestial Venerable Zhang Long naturally noticed his gaze and raised his head slightly to look in his direction. Celestial Venerable Zhang Long's appearance was difficult to see clearly, and only a pair of eyes could be seen. They were very deep and there were wisps of strange light intertwining in his eyes. The next moment, this ancient existence from the primordial age stretched out his hand and flicked his finger. A ray of dragon light flew out and pierced through a space tunnel, leading directly to the outside of Extreme Temple and subduing Arrow Palace. One could vaguely see the vast sky of the outside world. The creatures that were involved in this place have all been moved out by Senior Brother. Now only you are left. He looked at Lin Tian and said, "Leave this place with the girl beside you and your friends as soon as possible." Lin Tian's expression changed. His delusion breaker divine eye had seen through many things. At this moment, Celestial Venerable Zhang Long had released more dragon patterns and sent them to every corner of Extreme Temple and subduing Arrow Palace. He was going to destroy Extreme Temple and subduing Arrow Palace later, so he wanted them to leave now to ensure their safety. Dragon light also intertwined in his eyes. He looked at Wu Yi and said, "Let's go." Wu Yi didn't care about anything in this place. Hearing Lin Tian's words, he nodded slightly. Lin Tian then called out to Shui Shui, Wishing Crocodile, and Little Tai Chu. The group directly stepped into the space tunnel that Celestial Venerable Zhang Long had created and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the top of the sky, Grand Supreme watched as Wu Yi and Lin Tian's group disappeared. Wisps of faint cold light intertwined in his eyes. Buzz! The silver Tao diagram of the four symbols flashed past with the power to annihilate all things. It almost cut off Grand Supreme's head. Fengshen Tianzuan looked in the direction where Lin Tian's group disappeared. His eyes became more and more profound. Then, he retracted his gaze. The seal of the four symbols became stronger. The power of the seal and the power of annihilation intertwined. The aura was so strong that it was terrifying. The dazzling Tao diagram enveloped Grand Supreme, the Book of Life and Death, and the Lord of Hell at the same time. It attacked the three existences at the same time. Boom! The nameless remnant soul was domineering and direct. Black light covered the sky and earth. It cooperated with Fengshen Tianzuan to attack. In another position, Celestial Venerable Zhang Long looked in the direction where Lin Tian's group disappeared. The strange light in his eyes became stronger, and there was a hint of doubt. However, in the next moment, the strange light and doubt in his eyes disappeared. Once again, they returned to being deep and calm. Buzz! Dense dragon patterns circled out and hid in the void, spreading to every corner of the subduing arrow hall of the Extreme Palace. At the peak of the sky, outside the Book of Life and Death, an endless amount of death aura surged. At this time, it obviously saw what Celestial Venerable Zhang Long was doing. The surging power of life and death rolled. It gave up on Fengshen Tianzuan and the nameless remnant soul, and rushed straight towards Celestial Venerable Zhang Long. Fengshen Tianzuan waved his hand. A silver Tao diagram of the four symbols silently appeared in front of the Book of Life and Death. It was like a part of the sky was pressing down, directly restraining the Book of Life and Death, making it temporarily unable to escape and interfere with Celestial Venerable Zhang Long. God's seal! A hazy voice came from the Book of Life and Death. At this moment, it was filled with cold intent. Fengshen Tianzuan's eyes were calm. The nameless remnant soul attacked together. The Grand Supreme, the Lord of Hell, and the Book of Life and Death firmly restrained the three of them in a fixed area. No matter how strong the three of them were, it was difficult for them to escape in a short time. It was also at this time that outside the Extreme Palace and the subduing Arrow Hall, not far away, the space cracked open. Lin Tian, Wu Yi, and the others stepped out and reappeared under the sky of the celestial region. We're out. It's still more comfortable outside. Wishing Crocodile took a deep breath and then looked at a place 10,000 feet away. Lin Tian was also looking in that direction. At this time, in a place 10,000 feet away from them, there was a huge divine hall in the sky. It was surrounded by a frightening fog. It was the Extreme Palace, and the subduing Arrow Hall was located within the Extreme Palace. Wu Yi, can you let us see the situation inside? Chapter 16-15. There were a few ancient existences fighting in the extreme temple and the ambushing arrow hall, including Feng Xingtianzuan and celestial venerable Zhang Long. Therefore, Lin Tian was very concerned about the battle and wanted to see the final outcome. Wu Yi nodded and a light screen appeared silently in front of him. It was like a divine mirror and soon, images appeared. It was the battle between the extreme temple and the 6 ancient existences, including Feng Xingtianzuan, in the ambushing arrow hall. Through the light screen, one could see various kinds of divine light surging in the extreme temple and the aura of destruction spreading in all directions. Feng Xingtianzuan and the nameless remnant soul restrained the Grand Supreme, Pluto, and the Book of Life and Death. They fought until the sky collapsed. Roar! The dragon's roar shook the sky. After dozens of breaths, celestial venerable Zhang Long moved. At this moment, he stepped into the battlefield at the top of the sky. The true dragon formed by the dragon patterns roared and rolled toward the Grand Supreme, Pluto, and the Book of Life and Death at the same time. Then, he raised his hand and formed a seal. The entire extreme temple and the ambushing arrow hall shook. Dragon patterns appeared in every corner and turned into an extremely vast dragon burial array. It extracted the power of the extreme temple and the ambushing arrow hall and turned them into destructive dragons that rushed toward the battlefield at the top of the sky. They drowned the Grand Supreme, Pluto, and the Book of Life and Death. Moreover, at the same time, gloomy light erupted from many places in extreme temple and ambushing arrow hall. Cracks appeared one after another, as if a terrifying earthquake had occurred. The entire extreme temple and ambushing arrow hall began to collapse. No wonder he's celestial venerable Zhang Long. He used the dragon burial scripture to extract the power of the extreme temple and the ambushing arrow hall for himself to attack the Grand Supreme, Pluto, and the Book of Life and Death. He even used it to destroy the extreme temple and the ambushing arrow hall. He's really... Whooshing Crocodile's heart palpitated. Lin Tian was also shocked. Extreme temple and ambushing arrow hall were not simple. Now, celestial venerable Zhang Long had used the dragon burial scripture to extract the evil power of these 2 held divine halls. Moreover, he had also used this power to destroy extreme temple and ambushing arrow hall. However, he opened his divine eyes of delusion breaker and looked at the scene inside extreme temple and ambushing arrow hall through the light screen that Wu Yi was holding up. After a pause, he couldn't help but frown slightly. If it's just like this, it seems that it will still be somewhat difficult to completely destroy extreme temple and ambushing arrow hall. Extreme temple and ambushing arrow hall had already begun to crumble under celestial venerable Zhang Long's dragon burial formation. However, there was still the replica Life and Death book, the Grand Supreme Divine Sense Incarnation, and the Nether King's Divine Sense Incarnation. These 3 were the most ancient existences. Even though they were only incarnations of remnant thoughts, their power was still endless. Although Feng Xingtianzuan, celestial venerable Zhang Long, and Zhan Dou were also very powerful, they were only incarnations of remnant souls. The strength and number of people on both sides were equal. In addition, extreme temple and ambushing arrow hall were extremely sturdy. In the end, it would be very difficult to truly destroy extreme temple and ambushing arrow hall. Boom! Rays of destructive light intertwined in extreme temple and ambushing arrow hall. The surroundings turned dark and the entire place changed color. Dragon burial! A hazy voice came from the Life and Death book. It was extremely cold and there was an extremely terrifying murderous intent that swept out. With a swoosh, the endless void was annihilated. At this moment, its speed was extremely fast, and it pounced on celestial venerable Zhang Long. Moreover, the Grand Supreme Divine Sense Incarnation and the Nether King's Incarnation attacked together. While fighting against Feng Xingtianzuan and Zhan Dou's remnant soul, they also attacked celestial venerable Zhang Long together with the Life and Death book. They wanted to kill celestial venerable Zhang Long's incarnation first. Then, they would disintegrate the dragon burial formation and stop the destruction of extreme temple and ambushing arrow hall. These 2 divine temples were of great significance to their side. Crack! At this moment, a huge crack appeared in the sky and another hazy figure stepped out. Endless illusory figures of great worlds surrounded him. Then, these illusory figures of great worlds pressed down and instantly enveloped the life and death book. They annihilated the killing power of the Grand Supreme Divine Sense Incarnation and the Nether King's Incarnation. Dao run! The voice from the Life and Death book was still hazy, but it was obviously colder, and the aura of death was surging. Lin Tianyi and the others were tens of thousands of feet away from Extreme Yin Temple. With the help of the strange light screen that Wu Yi held up, not only could they see everything in Extreme Yin Temple and Ambushing Arrow Hall, but they could also hear the sounds. At this moment, when they heard the voice from the Life and Death book and saw the hazy figure surrounded by the illusory figures of great worlds, Lin Tianyi and Wishing Crocodile's expressions changed again. Celestial Venerable Dao Rin? Lin Tianyi's pupils contracted. Beside him, Wishing Crocodile also widened its eyes. 3 of the legendary 9 people have appeared together. Moreover, this aura is so powerful. At this moment, it could naturally see that the aura outside Celestial Venerable Dao Ren's body was terrifying. It was no weaker than Celestial Venerable Zhang Long's. Are those 9 people really reincarnated? Are they all from the same origin? Moreover, it saw the illusory figures of great worlds outside Celestial Venerable Dao Ren's body. Its power was unparalleled. Are those formed by the divining divine skill? Lin Tianyi looked at that place. Even though they were tens of thousands of feet away, the divining divine skill in his body involuntarily circulated. Obviously, those illusory figures of great worlds were indeed formed by Celestial Venerable Dao Ren's divining divine skill. The divining divine skill in his body felt the aura and resonated with it. Boom! In Extreme Yin Temple and Ambushing Arrow Hall, endless illusory figures of great worlds surged and shrouded the Life and Death book. The surging power of death from the Life and Death book was instantly defeated. The illusory figures of the great worlds also dissipated. Immeasurable life and death. A voice came from the Life and Death book. The Life and Death Dharma appeared immediately and continued to engulf Celestial Venerable Zhang Long. The surging Life and Death Dharma was extremely terrifying. It was the power of the eternal divine path. In the blink of an eye, it pressed down on Celestial Venerable Zhang Long and engulfed Celestial Venerable Dao Rin. Clang! At this moment, the ear-piercing sound of a weapon rang out. A stone spear appeared in Celestial Venerable Dao Ren's hand. The tip of the stone spear had a drop of blood the size of a baby's thumb. It would never dry up and contained an extremely terrifying aura. Holding the stone spear, Celestial Venerable Dao Rin gently shook it. A ray of black light shot out from the stone spear and instantly shattered the endless Life and Death Dharma in the Life and Death book. It directly pierced through the Life and Death book and weakened the aura of the Life and Death book. You actually managed to find it. The Nether King's eyes turned cold. It's naturally not that simple to destroy your incarnations and spiritual consciousness and erase Extreme Yin Temple and Ambushing Arrow Hall. It's impossible with ordinary methods. Feng Shintianzun spoke for the first time. Countless years ago, we threw it into the endless abyss. How did you find it? The Grand Supreme's eyes were cold. It's an ancient artifact that Master used in the past. No matter where you suppress it, we can find it. Celestial Venerable Dao Rin said. With a whoosh, the stone spear in his hand flew out and appeared in front of Feng Shintianzun. Feng Shintianzun's eyes were calm. He raised his hand and grabbed the stone spear. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying aura surged out. When this aura appeared, the Grand Supreme's incarnation, the Nether King's incarnation, and the replica of the Life and Death book involuntarily trembled. You! Very good! The Grand Supreme said coldly. His vast and mighty light filled the sky and pressed down on Feng Shintianzun. At the same time, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He directly tore through the void and disappeared on the spot. This caused the expressions of Lin Tian and the rest to change. The ancient highest elder, the legendary existence, now, actually fled? Not only them, but even Feng Shintianzun, Celestial Venerable Daorin, and Celestial Venerable Zhang Long were slightly shocked. A strange light flashed in their eyes. Obviously, they did not expect this to happen. It was too late to stop them. The other party had already left. Buzz! The void was distorted. The Nether King and the replica of the Life and Death book retreated. Like the Grand Supreme, they hid in the void and chose to escape. They knew very well how terrifying the stone spear in Fengxing Tianzuan's hand was. Now, Fengxing Tianzuan was holding this ancient weapon and had the help of Celestial Venerable Zhang Long, the Nameless Remnant Soul, and Celestial Venerable Daorin. If they resisted it head-on, they would be destroyed in the end. Although there were only incarnations and weak spiritual consciousnesses in the replica of the Life and Death book here, their original bodies would not be affected even if they were destroyed. However, these incarnations and spiritual consciousnesses were deliberately left behind for other purposes. If they were destroyed in this place, it would affect many things. The Life and Death book had even abandoned the Extreme Temple and Subduing Arrow Hall for this. Clang! The sound of weapons was ear-piercing. The stone spear in Fengxing Tianzuan's hand vibrated and shattered the greater void. The Nether King's incarnation and the replica of the Life and Death book were shaken out. At the same time, the power of the stone spear and the four symbols seal completely sealed the surrounding space. Nether King, Sage King Lun Zhuan, your incarnations and the remnant consciousness in the replica of the sacred weapon will be buried here today. The Grand Supreme escaped too abruptly, and he did not react in time to stop him. However, now that the Nether King's incarnation and the Life and Death book had escaped, he was naturally on guard. Celestial Venerable Daorin walked over. Endless illusory images of worlds surrounded his body as if they were real worlds. Celestial Venerable Zhang Long's eyes were deep. The dragon patterns on his body intertwined and revealed true dragons. The dragon roars were loud and ear-piercing. The Nameless Remnant Soul was the most direct and domineering. Blood rushed out from the ancient sarcophagus behind him and headed straight for the Nether King and the Life and Death book. Fengxing Tianzuan, Celestial Venerable Daorin, and Celestial Venerable Zhang Long also moved. With Fengxing Tianzuan, who was holding the stone spear in his hand, they launched a destructive attack. Boom! 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 This kind of attack was terrifying, especially the stone spear in Fengxing Tianzuan's hand. It was so powerful that even the Nether King and the Life and Death book were forced to dodge. In the blink of an eye, they were pierced through several times. Their auras weakened rapidly. In the blink of an eye, 15 minutes passed. Chi! Dim light sputtered. The stone spear in Fengxing Tianzuan's hand pierced through the Nether King's incarnation's forehead. The drop of blood on the stone spear shone with immortal holy light, causing cracks to appear on the Nether King's incarnation. Investiture of the gods! You! Very good! The Nether King's incarnation's eyes were extremely cold. Fengxing Tianzuan did not say anything. The ancient spear in his hand shook slightly and directly shattered the Nether King's incarnation. At the same time, Celestial Venerable Zhang Long, Celestial Venerable Daorin, and the Nameless Remnant Soul besieged the Life and Death book replica. Each of them used powerful supernatural powers and secret skills to shatter the Life and Death book replica. A ray of black light of death rushed out from it. Nameless Zhang Long Daorin! Investiture of the gods! This ball of black light intertwined with the rich power of life and death. It was a wisp of spiritual consciousness left behind by the Lord of Hell, Holy King Lun Zhuan. Fengxing Tianzuan did not say anything else. The stone spear in his hand shook and flew out like a bolt of lightning. It directly pierced through the ball of black light and instantly shattered the spiritual consciousness left behind by the Lord of Hell in the Life and Death book replica. It turned into a light fog and dissipated. His eyes were so deep that the bottom could not be seen. He formed a seal with one hand and the stone spear flew out again. It carried a drop of blood and directly pierced through the Extreme Temple and the Arrow's Subduing Hall. Together with the dragon burial formation of Celestial Venerable Zhang Long, the Extreme Temple and the Arrow's Subduing Hall were torn apart in an instant. Every part of them began to collapse and turned into dust inch by inch. Tens of thousands of feet away, Lin Tianyi and the others saw this scene and could not help but feel a chill down their spines. The Nether King's incarnation, the life and death book replica, the spiritual consciousness of the Lord of Hell, the extreme temple and the arrows subduing hall. They are all destroyed. Lin Tian's eyes could not help but flicker. P.S. Well, recently, the first update is placed at 5 o'clock in the morning. It is convenient for everyone to see it when they wake up. Many of you should have noticed this. Also, there is no fixed time for the second update every day. About this, I have to save some manuscripts as soon as possible and confirm it. When the time comes, I will tell everyone after the update. Chapter 16:16. The Supreme Incarnation had escaped, the Netherworld King's incarnation was destroyed, the Life and Death Book replica and the spiritual consciousness of the Lord of Hell were destroyed, and the Extreme Temple and Subduing Arrow Hall were also destroyed. Lin Tian could not help but be moved by such a huge event that happened in just one day. Those people are simply... And Shui Shui sucked in a breath of cold air. With a rumbling sound, the Extreme Temple and Subduing Arrow Hall, which were tens of thousands of feet away, were torn apart. Then, the cracked parts continued to collapse, turning into pieces of stone fragments that drifted away. Feng Xingtianzuan's incarnation, Celestial Master Zhanglong's incarnation, Celestial Master Doran's incarnation, and the nameless remnant soul were all there. Celestial Master Daoran suddenly looked in Lin Tian's direction. Just like Feng Xingtianzuan and the others, his appearance was also difficult to see clearly. Only a pair of deep eyes could be seen. "Seen your brother, that young man?" Celestial Master Daoran asked Feng Xingtianzuan. There was a trace of doubt in his deep eyes that were like black holes. Feng Xingtianzuan shook his head and said, "Let's go." Celestial Master Daoran finally looked in Lin Tian's direction. In the next moment, the four of them disappeared silently. "They're all gone," Lin Tian muttered to himself. He looked in that direction. The Extreme Temple and Subduing Arrow Hall were still collapsing. After a dozen breaths, the Extreme Temple and Subduing Arrow Hall completely collapsed and turned into ashes. Only wisps of smoke and fog floated in the air. Looking in that direction, he paused for a moment. Then, he took a deep breath and called Wu Yi. The group landed on the ground. "I really didn't expect to see 3 of the 9 people in this place. Moreover, they are all reincarnations of supreme existences from before the Antiquity Age. Moreover, they are all from the same sect. This is really..." Wishing Crocodile sighed. He was still shocked by the appearance of Feng Xingtianzuan and the others and the fact that they were reincarnations and fellow disciples of the same sect. Moreover, the battle that happened here today was really shocking. It was like a battle of the legendary level. Lin Tian looked at the place where Feng Xingtianzuan and the others had disappeared and said, "It seems that the Grand Elder Jiama and the Lord of Hell are on the same side. The 9 celestial masters, including Feng Xingtianzuan, and the first taboo, Wu Ming, are on the same side. The 2 sides seem to have been fighting since the remote antiquity times and have continued to fight until today. Tell me, what is the reason?" "Who knows?" Wishing Crocodile said. "However, no matter what the reason is, Taishang, Pluto, and the Lord of Hell are definitely not good people. This is certain." "I think so too." And Shui Shui felt the same way. "Yeah." Little Taichu waved its little paws and cried. It was obviously expressing the same meaning as Wishing Crocodile and in Shui Shui. Previously it was sealed by the Ambush Arrow King, a subordinate of the Lord of Hell, and it was very unhappy. Since Taishang, Pluto, and the Lord of Hell were on the same side as the Lord of Hell, they were definitely not good people. The little guy's thoughts were that simple. Then, the little guy's eyes curved into small crescents. It stood on Wu Yi's shoulder and intimately rubbed against Wu Yi's cheek. Wu Yi raised his hand and rubbed the little guy's little head. And Shui Shui looked at this scene with envy. He couldn't wait to exchange places with the little guy immediately. Lin Tian looked at Wu Yi and smiled. Then he asked, Oh right, Wu Yi, what do you plan to do next? Wu Yi was swept into the immortal region because of him and the blood ancestors' blood-devouring divine formation. Previously, they should have been together at Ethereal Mountain. Now that everything here was over, he didn't know whether Wu Yi planned to return to the 10 Directions heavenly region or stay with them for the time being. Wu Yi looked at Lin Tian, then looked around. After a pause, he said to Lin Tian Dao, I'll go with you guys. Let's walk around. Okay. Lin Tian naturally knew what Wu Yi meant. Wu Yi spent almost all his time at Ethereal Mountain and rarely went out. Now that he was unexpectedly swept into the immortal region, it was obvious that he wanted to walk around the outside world. He looked at Wu Yi and said with a smile, I also think that you should walk around more. Yes. Wu Yi nodded slightly. Then, a faint light suddenly flashed through his peaceful eyes. He activated his divine power and directly shook little Taichu away from his shoulder. At the same time, he shook Lin Tian and Shui Shui and Wishing Crocodile away as well. Almost in the next instant, a cold voice rang out. It was the voice of the Grand Supreme who had escaped from Extreme Yin Temple earlier. Your divine senses are very good. You can even detect this. As this voice rang out, a huge dark vortex instantly appeared beside Wu Yi and directly swept Wu Yi into it. This divine consciousness incarnation was originally left behind by us for other matters. However, it has greater value than dealing with you. Burn with it and banish you to eternity. The cold voice then disappeared. However, the dark vortex still existed and quickly swallowed Wu Yi. This sudden scene caused little Taichu, Wishing Crocodile, and Shui Shui to turn pale with fright. Lin Tian was also greatly shocked. He never expected that the Grand Supreme who had escaped from Extreme Yin Temple would suddenly attack them. Moreover, such an ancient existence would actually launch a sneak attack and burn his divine consciousness incarnation to deal with Wu Yi. At the same time, he instantly understood why Wu Yi had shaken them all away just now. It was obviously to prevent them from getting into trouble. At this time, seeing that Wu Yi was quickly being swallowed into the dark vortex, he was anxious. He directly burst out with his fastest speed, turning into a humanoid lightning bolt, and rushed over. He grabbed Wu Yi's hand, who was being sucked into the dark vortex, and wanted to pull him out of the dark vortex. However, that dark vortex was so terrifying that even Wu Yi, who was a half-step divine emperor who could instantly kill an ordinary half-step divine emperor, could be sucked into it. How could he, who was only a true immortal, possibly pull Wu Yi out of it? The dark vortex's terrifying suction force pulled him in as well. Together with Wu Yi, they instantly disappeared. In the next moment, the dark vortex also dissipated. Eee! Lin Tian! Little Taichu flapped its 6-colored wings and flew over. However, Lin Tian and Wu Yi had already disappeared. Not even a trace of their aura was left behind. They had disappeared without a trace. Disappeared. Wishing Crocodile's eyes widened. Could it be? Looking at the place where Lin Tian and Wu Yi had disappeared, his monster body trembled slightly. And Shui Shui was also anxious. She knew what Wishing Crocodile was thinking at this moment. She said, They shouldn't have been killed by the dark vortex. Before the Great Supreme disappeared, he mentioned the word exile. They must still be alive. Exile? Where did they get exiled to? Wishing Crocodile asked anxiously. I don't know. And Shui Shui shook her head. Her eyes were full of worry. But it can't be a good place. Then she gritted her teeth. She was worried and angry at the same time. That old bastard, he was one of the oldest existences before the Antiquity Age. How could he sneak attack us like that? Bastard! In the endless darkness, Lin Tian couldn't see or sense anything. The only thing he could feel was a touch of softness in his hand. He knew that it was Wu Yi's hand. At this moment, in the endless darkness, he couldn't see or sense his surroundings clearly. He couldn't even make a sound. However, he was strangely calm. He was still alive, so Wu Yi must be fine too. Moreover, he was holding Wu Yi's hand. Wu Yi was right beside him. Time passed silently. After an unknown amount of time, the darkness gradually dispersed. He felt a strong force on his body. Then, his vision became bright again. He stepped on solid ground again. Looking around, the sky was slightly dark. There were some strange plants around, and the soil was very barren. "Aren't you stupid?" A gentle voice sounded beside him. Lin Tian turned his head and saw Wu Yi's side profile. She was quiet and beautiful. She was calmly looking into the distance. He knew what Wu Yi meant. He knew that the dark whirlpool could even suck in a half-step godly emperor expert like her. He couldn't do anything even if he rushed over. Why did he still rush over after she pushed him away? Why did he put himself in danger? How could I watch you get sucked into that unknown whirlpool without doing anything? If I rushed over, what if a miracle happened and I could pull you out? Even if I couldn't, I could at least bear the danger with you. He smiled. Besides, aren't we all fine now? Wu Yi looked into the distance. Her expression didn't change, but a faint light flashed in her eyes. This place, we're not fine, she said. Why not? We're not injured at all. Aren't we all fine? Lin Tian was a little confused. Then he looked at Wu Yi curiously. After a pause, he said, Speaking of which, you didn't use your divine will when you said those 2 sentences. Wu Yi had always used her divine will to speak. Since he met Wu Yi, he had only seen Wu Yi speak once. However, at this time, in this place, Wu Yi spoke 2 sentences consecutively. She didn't use her divine will to speak. This surprised him. Wu Yi looked into the distance. Her delicate lips moved. 4 words came out of her mouth. Cultivation can't be used. Lin Tian's expression changed. He hurriedly sensed his own body. Then his expression changed. He couldn't sense his own cultivation. The divine power in his body seemed to have disappeared. Even his sturdy body had become like an ordinary person's. Our cultivation disappeared? He looked at Wu Yi. Wu Yi shook her head. It's just suppressed by this world. It's suppressed by this world? Hearing this, Lin Tian frowned. He looked around and said, You mean, our cultivation didn't disappear? It's just that we can't use it in this world. After we leave here, we'll return to our original state? Yes. Wu Yi nodded. Seeing Wu Yi nod his head, Lin Tian heaved a sigh of relief. Then, in the next moment, he was puzzled again. He looked around again and asked Wu Yi, Where is this place? Chapter 16-17. In response to Lin Tian's question, Wu Yi looked into the distance and said, Wushang Domain. Wushang Domain? Lin Tian Wei was puzzled. This was the first time he had heard of these words. It's a great world without spiritual energy, or immortal spiritual energy. Even a god emperor would be suppressed to an ordinary person if he lived in it. It's also known as the heaven and earth cage, Wu Yi said. Lin Tian looked at Wu Yi. This was the longest sentence Wu Yi had said since Wu Yi met him. At the same time, he was even more shocked by what Wu Yi said. Even a god emperor would be suppressed to an ordinary person if he lived in this place? Is it that exaggerated? A god emperor was the most powerful realm on the path of cultivation. His divine power was limitless, but even such an existence would be suppressed to an ordinary person if he came here? Wu Yi didn't say anything else. He just nodded slightly. Doesn't that mean we can't leave this place? Lin Tian frowned. Living in this emptiness territory, their cultivation had been suppressed to 0, and they were unable to use their divine sense and divine energy. Even their powerful physiques had been suppressed to the level of an ordinary person. So, how could they leave this world? This was equivalent to directly trapping them in this world. If I'm not mistaken, that's the case, Wu Yi said calmly. Lin Tian frowned even more. He couldn't help but understand why the Grand Supreme wanted to drag Wu Yi into this place. He obviously sensed Wu Yi's terrifying potential and didn't want to leave such a huge threat behind. That clone wasn't a match for Wu Yi. Therefore, The Grand Supreme burned that divine sense clone to launch a sneak attack and drag Wu Yi into this Wushang domain where even a god emperor would be suppressed to an ordinary person. He wanted to trap Wu Yi in this world forever. Thinking of this, he looked at Wu Yi's face. His furrowed brows relaxed, and he became a bit speechless. This was because even though he knew that he might be trapped in this world forever, Wu Yi was still so calm and composed. He still didn't show any emotion. Hand? Wu Yi looked into the distance and spoke again. Lin Tianwei was stunned, then quickly reacted. Previously, she wanted to pull Wu Yi out of the dark vortex summoned by Taishang's burning incarnation, but she grabbed Wu Yi's hand and fell here. Until now, she was still holding on to Wu Yi. He let go of Wu Yi's hand and smiled awkwardly. Then, what do we do next? He asked. Wu Yi paused and said, I don't know. In fact, Lin Tian didn't want to get a good idea from Wu Yi. He just wanted to divert the awkwardness from his current situation. Then let's walk around first. Just take it as a leisurely stroll, and at the same time, get familiar with this world, he said. After being swept into this strange wantless void domain, they were unable to use their cultivation and became no different from ordinary mortals. After this, whether it was to find a way to leave this world, or to truly be trapped in this world for eternity, they needed to truly understand and familiarize themselves with this world. Okay. Wu Yi nodded. At that moment, Lin Tian looked around, then called out to Wu Yi and walked in a random direction. He had heard from Wu Yi that this great world called the Infinite Sky Realm could suppress even godly emperors into ordinary people. It was possible that they would never be able to leave this world. At first, he had been very worried. After all, being trapped in this place forever was really like being exiled forever. It was extremely terrible. However, seeing Wu Yi beside him, who had been quiet all this time, he couldn't help but be affected. At this time, although he was in a very bad situation, he was still very calm. In this wantless void domain, other than the somewhat dark sky and the somewhat barren land, it was no different from an ordinary world. The two of them walked, and in the blink of an eye, a full 2 days had passed. In these 2 days they had walked through many places and discovered that this world also had many living creatures and wild beasts. Of course, they were just ordinary wild beasts. They didn't have any demonic power, and they didn't have any intelligence. Then, not long after, a small village appeared in front of them. From afar they could see that there were people walking around in the village. This made Lin Tian somewhat surprised. He didn't expect that there would be humans in this prison of heaven and earth that could suppress even god emperors into ordinary mortals. However, when he thought about how there were many wild beasts in this world, and then looked again at the nearby village and the villagers walking back and forth in the village, he quickly understood. After all, if there were wild beasts in this world, then it wasn't a big deal that there were humans. Moreover, whether there were humans in this world or not didn't have much to do with whether this world could suppress god emperors into ordinary mortals or not. Shall we stay there for a while? He asked Wu Yi. In these 2 days he and Wu Yi had walked through many places in this world. At night, they would casually find a place to squat for the night. Now that they had found a village with humans living in it, they could have a real place to rest. Naturally, it was a good choice. It was much more comfortable than squatting in the wild. Of course, the most important thing was that they could ask a lot of questions where there were people. It was very useful for them to understand this world better. And Wu Yi nodded. Then, the two of them quickly arrived outside the small village. In this world, it was already dusk. There were very few people walking around in the village. The majority of the people had already gone to bed. Lin Tian and Wu Yi entered the small village and very politely requested to stay in the village for a while. At this time, the people who were still walking around in the village were mostly elders of the village. They were all in their 60s and were very easygoing and simple. They didn't have any vigilance against Lin Tian and Wu Yi, so they didn't ask too much and agreed. Go to that house. You can stay there for as long as you want. You can use the things in the house as you wish, said one of the elders. Said one of the old men. He pointed to a house in the southeast of the village for the village chief. Lin Tian found out that the owner of the house was a hunter in the village. Unfortunately, he had met with death in the mountains a few days ago. He thanked the elder and chatted for a while. Then, he and Wu Yi entered the house. The house was very ordinary. There was a bed, a kitchen stove, bowls, chopsticks, and so on. There were also some broadswords, spears, and bows. It was very suitable for a hunter to live in. View! A soft sound was heard. Lin Tian tilted his head and looked at Wu Yi. The sound came from Wu Yi's stomach. I'm hungry too. Lin Tian blushed with shame and helplessness. They were both powerful cultivators. One was a true immortal, and the other was a half-step divine emperor. But now that they were in this world, not only were their cultivations suppressed to the level of ordinary people, but they would also feel hungry if they didn't eat for a long time. He couldn't help but sigh. At the same time, he thought of an even worse problem. According to this situation, our lifespan won't be reduced to the level of ordinary people, only about 100 years, right? Wu Yi shook his head. No. It's still eternal life? Lin Tian asked. Yes. Wu Yi nodded. Hearing this, Lin Tian breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, although their cultivation was suppressed to the level of ordinary people and they didn't know how to leave this place, at least their lifespan was still unlimited. Under normal circumstances, they didn't have to worry about death. View! Another soft sound came from Wu Yi. Lin Tian blushed with shame. He coughed twice and said, Let's get some food first. Now, although they still had the body of eternal life and wouldn't die if they didn't eat, if they didn't drink, their hunger would continue. In this way, even if they didn't starve to death because of their body of eternal life, it would still be very uncomfortable if their hunger was maintained. Accompanied by the goo-goo sound of their stomachs, it was even more awkward and terrible. Therefore, even if they didn't drink, they could still live. Now, they had to maintain 3 meals a day. Wu Yi looked at the stove. There were still some vegetables and rice. Obviously, they were ingredients left behind by the owner of this house when he was alive. She walked over and quietly looked at these things. Then, she paused and didn't move for a long time. After another 10 breaths passed, she turned to look at Lin Tian and said, I don't know how to. Lin Tian looked at Wu Yi and opened his mouth. Then, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Just now, when he saw Wu Yi walk over to the stove, he originally thought that Wu Yi would be able to cook very quickly. Moreover, he felt that even if it was the simplest vegetables and rice, Wu Yi's food would definitely be very delicious. This was because, in his impression, Wu Yi was really perfect. This kind of small matter couldn't stump Wu Yi. However, what he didn't expect was that after Wu Yi walked over and paused there for a long time, she actually turned around and said to him, I don't know how to. What are you laughing at? Wu Yi asked him. Lin Tian now. Well, I just think it's a little interesting. Interesting? How should I put it? You're usually too perfect. So perfect that I can't help but feel ashamed. Do you still remember how little Z described you? Being too perfect is your strength, but also your only weakness. Lin Tian now that I've seen this side of you, I realize that there are some simple things that you don't know how to do. To be honest, well, this makes me a little happy. Wu Yi looked at him, her calm eyes flashing slightly. Then, she turned to the side and said, You do it. Lin Tian smiled and nodded. He walked forward and asked Wu Yi to wait by the side. He began to cook. For him, this kind of thing was as easy as turning over his hand. The food was quickly prepared. After filling his stomach, he quickly cleaned up the bowls and chopsticks. At this time, the sky had completely darkened, and there were sparse stars dotting the dark sky. Then, a new problem arose. Chapter 16-18. Originally, the two of them did not have a normal place to rest for the past few days, so it was very casual for them to find a place to squat for a night. However, now that they were living in the same room with only one bed, this situation was a bit awkward. Of course, this awkwardness was actually only in the beginning. After this moment, Lin Tian said to Wu Yi, Go rest on the bed. There are some wooden stools in the room. If you line them up, they can also be used as a bed. I'll use these wooden stools as a bed to rest." After being swept into the emptiness region by the Grand Elder, their cultivation was suppressed to the level of an ordinary person. Although they still had eternal life, they would feel hungry and thirsty. They would also feel sleepy. Although not eating or resting would not affect their lives, they would feel more uncomfortable. Therefore, even if they would not die without eating or resting, they still had to eat and rest. Okay. Wu Yi did not reject Lin Tian's offer to use the bed. The night passed quickly. In the dim sky, the stars gradually scattered, and the first rays of the morning sun floated out. On a new day, Lin Tian and Wu Yi did not leave the village. They continued to stay. With their current situation, they needed such a normal residence. There were roughly 30 or so families in this village, and they were all very simple and warm. They were not on guard against people at all. Lin Tian and Luli stayed in the village, and 3 days passed very quickly. Lin Tian gradually became familiar with the people in the village. During this time, Lin Tian chatted with the people in the village. He asked a lot of questions about this world and learned a lot of things. However, he did not get any useful information. In the blink of an eye, another few days passed. On this day, Lin Tian asked Wu Yi to stay in the village. He walked out of the village alone and took a hunting knife and a spear from the house. Not long after, he walked into a mountain far away from the village. He was going to hunt some wild beasts for them to eat. At the same time, he was going to trade with the other people in the village for daily necessities, such as rice and clothes. Because their cultivation was suppressed to zero, they could not take out the stone rings and things in their bodies. They could not take out some baodan and clothes. Now, they could only rely on beast meat of equal value to trade with the other people in the village for simple daily necessities. As for hunting, it was naturally very simple for him. Even though his cultivation had been suppressed to the level of an ordinary mortal, and his physical strength had temporarily been reduced to the level of an ordinary mortal, he was still an extremely powerful cultivator. He could still use his battle experience and simple martial techniques. Ordinary wild beasts were easy for him to deal with. At sunset, he carried a red fur lion that weighed about 200 yin back to the village. Everyone in the village was shocked. The villagers knew how powerful this red fur lion was. There were several hunters in the village, but none of them could deal with such a powerful beast. A few days ago, the hunters in the village were killed by this red fur lion. Many villagers surrounded Lin Tian and praised him. Lin Tian had a smile on his face. He simply tidied up the red fur lion and gave some red fur lion meat to the village chief, who agreed to let him and Wu Yi live in the village. He also used the red fur lion meat to exchange with other villagers for some rice and a few sets of clothes that were barely suitable for him and Wu Yi. In the following days, he still stayed in the village. From time to time, he would enter the distant mountains to hunt. He would also go to other places that were even further away, exploring this world and looking for a way for him and Wu Yi to leave this world. After all, although the possibility of him and Wu Yi being able to leave this world was close to zero, he could not obediently be trapped in this world forever. That was obviously not in line with his character. In the blink of an eye, nearly a year had passed. Still no gains. Under a large banyan tree at the edge of the village, Lin Tian and Wu Yi sat next to a scorching sun in the sky. For nearly a year, he had gone to many places, explored many places, and looked for clues that could lead to leaving this world. However, he did not find anything. "You've worked hard," Wu Yi said softly. In this year, the daily necessities, meals, and communication with the villagers were all done by Lin Tian. She was not good at these things. Although she also participated in the search for a way to leave this world, most of it was still done by Lin Tian. After being dragged into this world, Lin Tian was basically the one who took care of her in this year. "It's okay, this is not considered hard work," Lin Tian said with a smile. This year's life was very ordinary and dull. Although he had been looking for a way to leave this world and wanted to leave this world with Wu Yi, he did not find this kind of ordinary and dull life in this world boring at all. In fact, he liked it very much. At this time, the sound of footsteps came from afar. 2 little girls around 6 years old ran over from the village and surrounded the two of them. Or rather, they surrounded Wu Yi. They opened their big round eyes and looked up at Wu Yi. One of the little girls tugged at the corner of Wu Yi's clothes. "Sister, are you a princess?" The little girl's voice was crisp and very cute. "Princess?" Wu Yi looked at the little girl with confusion. "Because, sister, you are very beautiful. You are more beautiful than anyone Xiaowan has ever seen. You are the most beautiful," the little girl called Xiaowan said. "Sister must be a princess, right?" the other little girl said. She looked up at Wu Yi, her big eyes shining. Lin Tian remembered that this little girl's nickname was Xiao Ji. He also knew that even in such a strange world, the villagers would tell simple fairy tales to the children. Generally speaking, fairy tales were full of existences like princesses. Wu Yi looked at the 2 little girls and the 2 little girls who were full of expectation. For a moment, she did not know how to respond. She wanted to shake her head, but she was worried that she would destroy some kind of expectation in the hearts of the 2 little girls. However, when she nodded, she felt that it was inappropriate. As powerful and stunning as she was not good at dealing with this kind of thing. "That's right, sister is a princess." Lin Tian bent down and said for her. The 2 little girls immediately became happy, and their big eyes became even brighter. "Where is the princess from?" Xiaowan asked Lin Tian. "Oh," Lin Tian said with a smile. "The most beautiful country in the world." "The most beautiful country in the world? Where? Xiao Ji asked Lin Tian, looking a little excited and yearning. "A place very, very far away. When we grow up, can we also be as beautiful as Sister Princess?" "As long as you like and love Sister, when you grow up, you will definitely be as beautiful as Sister," Lin Tian said with a smile. "Really? Really?" "Yes. Xiao Wan will always like and love Sister Princess. Xiao Ji too." The 2 little girls became more and more happy. Xiao Wan even gave a small flower to Wu Yi and asked strange questions that were unique to children. It was not until more than 2 hours later that they left happily. Wu Yi looked at the flower that Xiao Wan gave her in her hand. Her eyes were very gentle, and there was some strange light in them. "Thank you," she said softly to Lin Tian. She was not very talkative and was not good at communicating with children like this. When faced with the various questions of 2 little girls around 5 years old, she really did not know how to deal with them. However, Lin Tian helped her answer all of the questions of the 2 little girls. Moreover, the most important thing was that he made the 2 little girls very happy in the end. She felt that it was difficult for her to do this kind of thing. Lin Tian looked at her and joked. "Do I look like a qualified princess attendant?" Facing Lin Tian's joke, Wu Yi looked at the small flower in her hand and smiled gently. Lin Tian could not help but be slightly startled. This seemed to be the first time that he made Wu Yi smile. In the blink of an eye, he came back to his senses and smiled to himself. Staying in this world, staying in this village, time passed quickly. After that, more than 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. In more than 10 years, Lin Tian was still constantly looking for a way to leave this world. Unfortunately, there were no clues. At the same time, a new problem emerged. That was, although they were now suppressed to the level of ordinary mortals by this strange world and needed to eat and sleep like normal people, they were still immortal existences. Their appearance was always the same and had never aged. This matter gradually aroused the curiosity of some people in the village. "It seems that we have to leave." At night, in the house, Lin Tian and Wu Yi said. A long time ago, he made some improvements to the house here. He added a second wooden bed and made a simple cloth partition between it and Wu Yi's bed. "Yes," Wu Yi said softly. Obviously, she knew what Lin Tian was thinking at this time. If they continued to stay in this village and their appearance never aged, it would soon arouse the suspicion and vigilance of the other villagers, and even panic. "Previously, when we were hunting in a mountain far away, we found a good place in the mountain. The air and environment are very good. I will take some time to build a simple house nearby, and then we will leave here. Lin Tian Andao. He did not want to arouse the vigilance and panic of the villagers here. He was even worried that the villagers here would be traumatized by their immortality, and that it would interfere with the normal lives of these villagers. Yes, Wu Yi replied. The night dispersed, and soon a new day came. In the following time, Lin Tian did not temporarily search for a way to leave this world. Instead, he took some time to build a house in a very good place in the distant mountain. It was not until about 2 months later that he barely finished. Chapter 16-19. They left the village and moved forward under the night sky. Because they were carrying many things, the speed of their footsteps could not be compared to normal. It was not until more than a day later that Lin Tian and Wu Yi entered a large mountain and came to a place in the center of the mountain. Looking around, this place was flatter than other places. There was a wooden house in front of them, and there were many green plants nearby. There was a small stream flowing more than 100 feet away. Because it was deep in the mountains, the water was very clear, and they could clearly see the stones at the bottom of the stream. Wu Yi looked around, and his eyes finally fell on the wooden house in front of them. The wooden house was not luxurious, but it was undoubtedly many times better than the houses of the 30 families in the village. In the future, this will be our new home in this world, Lin Tian said with a smile. He invited Wu Yi into the house, and then quickly put away some of the daily necessities he brought from the village. After a simple rest for 4 hours, Lin Tian took a hoe and walked to a large open space not far away. What are you doing? Wu Yi asked him. Planting some fruits and vegetables, etc., Lin Tian said with a smile. Now that we are suppressed to ordinary people, we need to eat and drink like ordinary people. In addition, we don't know how long we will be trapped in this world, so we need a basic source of food. Before leaving the village, he used the beast meat he hunted in the mountains to exchange with the villagers for rice, fruits, and other things that he did not need to worry about in the short term. At the same time, he also exchanged for some basic fruits and vegetable seeds. Now, he was ready to plant some seeds that could be planted. As for the planting and harvesting methods, he was very familiar with them. After all, before he embarked on the path of cultivation, he lived on Earth for 20 years. Simple planting and harvesting of fruits and vegetables was very common on Earth. In this place, the open space was very large, and there were many kinds of grass. He used the hoe he brought from the village to dig up some of the weeds in the open space. The soil below was not very fertile, but it could be said to be good. This was mostly related to the fact that this place was deep in the mountains, and there was a small stream flowing nearby. After removing the weeds, he turned the soil, making the soil loose, and then prepared to plant the vegetables. Can I help? Wu Yi looked at him and asked. Lin Tianwei was stunned. You know how? Teach me, Wu Yi said. Obviously, she wouldn't. Lin Tian paused for a moment, then smiled and said, Okay. This was not a difficult task, and Wu Yi was also very intelligent. After he gave a simple summary, Wu Yi learned it. After about 6 hours, the two of them stopped. They had planted a portion of the fruits and vegetables that could be planted and harvested quickly. In about 10 days, we should be able to harvest some fresh vegetables, Lin Tian said to Wu Yi. After saying that, he looked at the soil on his hands and couldn't help but want to laugh. They were two powerful cultivators, a true immortal and a half-step god king, but now, they were plowing a field to grow vegetables. However, this was also very interesting. The sky gradually darkened, and darkness soon descended. Stars soon adorned the firmament. They temporarily settled down in this mountain. A few days later, Lin Tian went to other places to continue exploring this world. Day and night alternated, and the 4 seasons changed. From the first time he and Wu Yi were involved in this world, 300 years had passed in the blink of an eye. During these 300 years, he had been to many places in this world. He had never given up looking for a way to leave this world, but unfortunately, he still had no clue. On this day, after exploring a certain area, he was walking back. When he was walking in a mountain, he suddenly heard a very dense beast roar in front of him, and the ground was rumbling. He looked over and saw an old man about 60 years old being chased by hundreds of wild beasts. His clothes were dirty, and he screamed from time to time. This person. Looking at the dirty old man, Lin Tian could not help but frown, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. At this time, the old man was being chased by hundreds of wild beasts. He seemed to be in a very sorry state. He screamed from time to time, but there was not the slightest trace of fear in his eyes. Moreover, from time to time, he would be able to crush the smaller wild beasts in front of him with his bare hands. This was definitely not something an ordinary hunter could do. Not to mention that the old man did not have any hunting knives or spears, nor could he crush the smaller wild beasts in front of him with his bare hands. Just the fact that the old man did not show the slightest trace of fear while being chased by hundreds of wild beasts at the same time was enough to show that the old man was not an ordinary person. A cultivator! Looking at the old man, his eyes narrowed slightly. In the blink of an eye, he was certain that this old man was definitely a cultivator. Thinking of this, he was somewhat moved. Apart from him and Wu Yi, there were other cultivators trapped in this world. Boy, hurry up and help me! Almost as soon as he focused his eyes on the old man also noticed him. After shouting at him, he directly ran in his direction. And as the old man ran in his direction, the hundreds of wild beasts chasing after him naturally also rushed in his direction. The ground could not help but tremble a little, and waves of dust and dirt flew up one after another. F***CKU! Lin Tian could not help but curse, then turned around and ran. This old man actually ran in his direction with hundreds of wild beasts. This was simply forcing a disaster onto him. Now that he was suppressed to an ordinary person, he could easily deal with a few wild beasts. But if he encountered hundreds of them at once, it would definitely be a huge disaster. There was no way he could deal with it. Moreover, although he still had the immortal body and would not die under normal circumstances, if he was eaten by a group of wild beasts, he would definitely die. Boy, why are you running? Don't run, help me! Boy, you are a dignified and strong young man, but now you are helplessly watching an old man in his twilight years being besieged by a group of crazy wild beasts. But instead of helping, you just turned around and ran. Does your conscience not hurt? The old man shouted as he ran towards him. Scram! Lin Tian scolded. This old man was running faster than him, and the distance between them was quickly closing. How dare he call himself an old man in his twilight years? You actually told a weak old man to scram? Don't you know how to respect the old and love the young, boy? The dirty old man shouted. Respect your grandfather! Lin Tian wanted to kick this old man. He gathered the strength in his legs and rushed forward quickly. The dirty old man kept running behind him. When he changed direction, the old man would change direction as well. And the hundreds of wild beasts naturally followed behind the dirty old man and rushed towards him. Rumble, the ground was constantly shaking, and more dust and dirt flew up. Some of the less thick trees were broken by the hundreds of wild beasts. The dirty old man quickly caught up to Lin Tian. As he ran, he tilted his head and said to Lin Tian, Now, boy, when you see injustice on the road, you should draw your sword to help. But you only care about running away, turning a blind eye to this old man's dangerous situation. Really not kind. Lin Tian gritted his teeth. He really wanted to stab him to death. Behind him, hundreds of wild beasts roared and rushed crazily, shaking the ground even more violently. Lin Tian looked back and once again gathered the strength to speed up his escape. At this time, he had no time to care about the unscrupulous old bastard next to him. After all, under the situation of being suppressed to an ordinary person, being chased by hundreds of wild beasts could almost be considered a dead end. Because all of these wild beasts were very fierce, and their speed was not slow. If they really caught up to him, he would definitely end up in the stomachs of these wild beasts. He tried his best to run forward. After dozens of breaths, the road in front of him was suddenly cut off. It was like a cliff. Boy, you're leading the way too badly. Next to him, the dirty old man stared. Scram! Lin Tian's desire to stab him to death grew stronger. Roar! Roar! The beast's roars were ear-piercing, and the ground rumbled. Hundreds of wild beasts rushed here, each of them more ferocious. Lin Tian looked at this scene, then looked down the cliff. Without the slightest hesitation, he directly jumped down. This cliff was dozens of feet deep. For him, who was suppressed to an ordinary person, jumping down from this height could be said to be very dangerous. However, if he did not jump, he would definitely die if the hundreds of wild beasts behind him rushed over. Therefore, at this time, jumping down the cliff was naturally a wise choice, and also the only choice. In addition, at the bottom of this cliff, he saw many lush trees. With the branches of these lush trees as a buffer, the risk would be reduced. Moreover, he had the immortal body, so jumping down like this would definitely not endanger his life. Of course, it was inevitable that he would suffer some injuries. Whoosh! Almost at the same moment he jumped down the cliff, the dirty old man jumped down as well. Hundreds of wild beasts saw Lin Tian, and the dirty old man jumped down the cliff, and slowly came to a stop. Although they were only ordinary wild beasts and did not have the intelligence of a human, they would not foolishly jump down the cliff as well. Then, in the next moment, hundreds of wild beasts suddenly broke out into a fight, and beasts' blood splattered everywhere. After all, these wild beasts were not of the same species. After losing a common target, it was natural that they would kill each other. After Lin Tian jumped down the cliff, he crossed dozens of feet in the blink of an eye and landed at the bottom of the cliff. Just as he expected, with the branches of the lush trees at the bottom of the cliff as a buffer, he jumped down from a height of dozens of feet with his current mortal body. Although he suffered some injuries, they were not serious, and only a little painful. Boy, after surviving a great disaster, you're bound to have good fortune in the future. The dirty old man jumped down the cliff together with him, landing dozens of feet away from him. He grimaced as he spoke to Lin Tian. It was obvious that he had suffered some injuries just like Lin Tian. Old bastard! Chapter 16:20. Looking at the dirty old man dozens of feet away, Lin Tian gritted his teeth fiercely. This old thing, for some reason, made him so unlucky. He was actually forced to jump off a cliff. You're a cultivator? He resisted the urge to slap the old man to death and asked. The dirty old man looked at Lin Tian and said, Living in this broken cage, you know that I'm a cultivator. As expected, you're also a cultivator. He didn't answer Lin Tian's question directly, but the meaning of his words was quite clear. It was indeed as Lin Tian guessed, he was a cultivator. Lin Tian was naturally able to discern this point. How did you fall into this world? Lin Tian asked. I was tricked by two old bastards. The dirty old man rolled his eyes and then gritted his teeth fiercely. Lin Tian laughed and cursed in his heart. Serves you right. What about you, kid? How did you fall in? The dirty old man asked Lin Tian. None of your business. Lin Tian now. Dirty old man opened his mouth and stared at Lin Tian with his eyes wide open. Lin Tian glanced at the dirty old man, stood up, stretched his body, looked around, and walked into the distance. Naturally, he could tell which direction the home he built in this world was in with just a few glances. Kid? You're leaving just like that? The dirty old man shouted. Lin Tian was too lazy to pay attention to the other party. He ignored the other party's voice and walked in a fixed direction. Soon, he was far away. About 6 hours later, he crossed a few mountains and returned to the wooden house he had built. What's wrong? Wu Yi stood in front of the wooden house and saw Lin Tian return with some injuries on his body. She asked Lin Tian now. Nothing much. I just ran into an old bastard and got dragged into this mess. Lin Tian smiled casually. Wu Yi didn't continue to ask. Lin Tian said goodbye to her and went back to the house to tidy himself up. At dusk, a faint aroma wafted out. Lin Tian had cooked some cooked dishes and placed them on the round wooden table in front of the house. The round wooden table was naturally made by Lin Tian. Usually, he and Wu Yi ate at this table. This is. A familiar voice sounded, and a dirty old man rushed out. Looking at the cooked dishes cooked by Lin Tian on the round wooden table, his eyes lit up and his body trembled slightly, as if he had found the most heaven-defying divine treasure. It's you! Lin Tian gritted his teeth. The old bastard who had caused his misfortune had actually followed him to this place. Wu Yi looked at the dirty old man who suddenly rushed out, then looked at Lin Tian. In an instant she knew that this dirty old man was the old bastard that Lin Tian had mentioned before. Beside the round wooden table, the dirty old man's hands moved very quickly. With a whoosh, he grabbed Lin Tian's wooden chopsticks and picked up a handful of cooked cabbage on the wooden table, chewing and swallowing it. Then, in the next moment, his body trembled and his voice trembled. It was unknown whether he was extremely excited or extremely sad, but he looked like he was about to cry. I was tricked by those two old bastards into this broken cage. I ate the meat of wild beasts and birds that were hundreds of thousands of years old, chewed on the bark and roots of trees that were hundreds of thousands of years old, swallowed hundreds of thousands of years old leaves and grass, and finally, I can taste normal food. Lin Tian. He originally wanted to beat this old bastard up, but when he heard the other party's sad story, he was quite speechless. How many years had this old bastard been in this world? It sounded like he had lived an extremely miserable life these years. Almost as he was thinking about this, the dirty old man moved very quickly. With a few swishes, he cleaned the two dishes that he had cooked. Then, he tilted his head and looked at him with an eager expression. Do you have more? Lin Tian's forehead was covered in black lines, and his face darkened. He turned around and took out a hunting knife from the house. Kid, don't mess around. A gentleman uses his mouth, not his fists. The dirty old man trembled and slipped away like the wind. Lin Tian put away the hunting knife and did not chase after him. In this world, time flew by quickly. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. In these 3 years, Lin Tian was still constantly looking for a way to leave this world. The only change was that there was one more person beside him. The dirty old man was always following him. Moreover, every time he returned to cook, the other party would pop out and shamelessly freeload his food and drink. This caused him to gradually feel helpless from his initial desire to chop the other party to death. This was because the other party was truly too shameless. Shameless to the point that he deeply believed in a certain saying. A shameless person is invincible. After that, he did not ask for the old man's name, and directly gave him the nickname of Old Gangster. He felt that it was very suitable for this old bastard. You've been trapped in this world for so long. Haven't you found any clues to leave this world? On this day, at dusk, Lin Tian asked the old gangster in front of the round wooden table outside the house. No. The old gangster shook his head and looked at Lin Tian now. This old man doesn't want to discourage you, but kid, it's basically impossible to leave this broken cage. Back then, when this old man was first tricked into this broken cage by those two old bastards, I was just like you are now, constantly searching for a way out. Once I searched for a way out for hundreds of thousands of years. Unfortunately, no matter how I searched, I found nothing. It was impossible to leave this broken place. Lin Tian heard this and could not help but frown. Beside him, Wu Yi was very calm. Or it could be said that she had always been very calm when she was trapped in this world. The old hoodlum looked at Lin Tian and said, That's why, kid, you should just give up. No matter how you search for a way to leave this world, you won't be able to find anything in the end. Don't waste your time pointlessly. Just peacefully live a simple life with that little girl by your side. You can even have a baby after some time. Isn't that better than wasting your time endlessly? Lin Tian heard this and could not help but stare. He looked at Wu Yi beside him and glared at the old gangster. What nonsense are you talking about? We are not in that kind of relationship. Not? The old gangster also stared. He looked at Wu Yi beside Lin Tian, and then looked at Lin Tian again. Look at this little girl's eyes. They are clearly filled with strong feelings. How can it be that they are not in that kind of relationship? Hearing the old gangster say such blunt words in front of Wu Yi, even though Lin Tian had lived for hundreds of years, he could not help but blush. You saw wrongly! Saw wrongly? Impossible! No matter what, I have lived for so many years. How can I see wrongly? The old gangster obviously did not feel Lin Tian's guilt and embarrassment at this moment. In order to prove that he did not see wrongly, he glared at Lin Tian now. You dare say that you don't like this little girl? Swear an oath. If there is a mistake, may the heavens strike lightning and cut off your bloodline. Lin Tianyi trembled and almost blurted out a F***CK. This damn old bastard is too vicious. Come on, swear an oath for me to hear. The old gangster really wanted to prove that he did not see wrongly. Lin Tian clenched his fists so tightly that they made cracking sounds. He turned around and pulled out a long spear from the house. The old gangster's eyes widened. Brat, what are you doing? Lin Tian tightly held onto the long spear and walked towards the old gangster step by step. At this time, the old gangster finally felt Lin Tian's guilt and embarrassment. Thinking back to his words just now, he could not help but tremble and immediately run away. Lin Tian's cheeks were dark and red. He held on to the long spear in his hand and directly chased after him. Wu Yi sat by the round wooden table as he watched Lin Tian chase after the old hoodlum's back. His calm eyes slightly fluctuated, and his calm face became a little dazed. Lin Tian left the wooden house and chased after the old gangster with the long spear in his hand. The long spear in his hand whistled through the air. Old bastard, don't run! I promise I won't stab you to death! He gritted his teeth and cursed, which was rare for him. Brat, you're flying into a rage out of humiliation! The old gangster trembled and ran away like he was flying. We can sit down and talk peacefully. There's no need to use violence. Talk your grandpa. Lin Tian waved the long spear in his hand. A thick old tree in front of him was smashed into pieces by him, wood chips flying everywhere. The old gangster stared at him. Brat, you've been suppressed to an ordinary person, but you still have so much strength. That old tree was more than 10 feet in diameter. It was very difficult for an ordinary cultivator of the Sea of Consciousness realm to smash it into pieces. However, Lin Tian, who had been suppressed to the level of an ordinary person, actually smashed it into pieces with a single spear. This made the old gangster feel a chill down his spine. Lin Tian gritted his teeth and glared at the old gangster. He chased after him with the long spear in his hand, and the air kept making whooshing sounds. Facing Lin Tian's angry face, the old gangster shuddered. Calm down! Brat, calm down! Calm is a blessing! Lin Tian didn't say anything. He chased after him with the long spear. The mountain was almost in chaos because of this. One of them ran, and the other chased. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. 3 days later, Lin Tiando had chased the old hooligan to an unknown place. Nearby was an unfamiliar short mountain. The mountain was crimson red, as if it had been soaked in blood. The surrounding air was slightly cold, bringing with it a sense of dread. It was also at this time that Lin Tian, who had chased him to this place, suddenly trembled. He immediately stopped, and shock appeared in his eyes. He had chased him to this place. Just a moment ago, he had sensed his sea of consciousness. The 7-colored divine sword at the bottom of his sea of consciousness moved slightly. Although it was only for a moment, and he couldn't sense his sea of consciousness again at this time, he believed that it wasn't an illusion just now. Just now, he really sensed his sea of consciousness, and he really saw the divine sword at the bottom of his sea of consciousness move. Here. He looked at this group of red short mountains, and his eyes couldn't help but flicker. This group of short mountains was unusual. In front of him, the old gangster looked angry. At this time, when he saw Lin Tian suddenly stop, he also stopped. Then, he saw the shock in Lin Tian's eyes and immediately felt a trace of abnormality. Brat, what's wrong? He asked Lin Tiandao. Chapter 16:21. Strange? What's strange? The old gangster asked in confusion. Strange means strange. Lin Tian didn't give a specific explanation. He glanced at the mountain range and said to the old gangster, "Split up and explore this mountain range carefully. If you find anything special, call out immediately. Maybe you can find a clue to leave this world here." "What?" Hearing Lin Tian's last sentence. "Maybe you can find a clue to leave this world here." The old gangster obviously didn't believe it. He squinted at Lin Tian now and said, "Boy, are you kidding me? Cut the crap and search." Lin Tian now. After saying that, he didn't give the old gangster time to think or ask more questions. He directly began to explore the Crimson Mountain Range. The old gangster didn't believe Lin Tian's. "Maybe you can find a clue to leave this world here." After all, he had been trapped in this world for too long. In such a long time, he had never found any clue to leave this world. However, looking at Lin Tian's extremely serious expression, he couldn't help but feel that there might really be a clue to leave this world here. In the final analysis, the reason why he had such an idea was that, in addition to Lin Tian's serious expression, he also wanted to leave this world very much. Immediately, he looked in another direction. Just like Lin Tian, he seriously explored this black mountain range. In the blink of an eye, a full 12 hours passed. "Boy, are you sure you're not making fun of me? You purposely said that there might be clues to leave this world here, so that this old man would have hope and search this mountain range with blazing hope. Finally, you told this old man that you were wrong, so that this old man would feel despair and taste the feeling of falling from heaven to hell?" The old gangster bared his teeth. In 12 hours, the two of them had explored more than half of this mountain range, but they didn't find anything special. Lin Tian didn't bother to pay attention to the old gangster. He frowned slightly. After coming here, the divine sword in his sea of consciousness did move just now. He was sure that this place was definitely unusual. However, they had searched more than half of this place, but they didn't find anything strange. Buzz! Suddenly, a buzzing sound came from his head. In an instant, he sensed his sea of consciousness again. He saw the divine sword at the bottom of his sea of consciousness move, and a faint 7-colored divine light spread out from his sea of consciousness to the east. A bright light flashed in his eyes. He looked to the east of the mountain range and ran in that direction. "What happened?" Seeing Lin Tian's action, the old gangster immediately followed Lin Tian and ran towards the east of the mountains. The two of them were currently suppressed to ordinary people. However, their speed was naturally several times faster than ordinary people. Very quickly, they ran far away. After dozens of breaths, the two of them came to a stop. A large crack appeared in front of them. It was about 1 meter wide and 10 meters long. It was pitch black below, and they couldn't see the bottom. Waves of icy aura floated out from below. Lin Tian looked at the crack, and his eyes glowed. After coming here, he once again felt his sea of consciousness. The divine sword at the bottom of his sea of consciousness trembled again. Although it was only for a moment, it made him realize that there was definitely something unusual under this large crack. "Brat, you came all the way here just to see this crack?" When the old hoodlum saw Lin Tian staring at the crack without blinking, he couldn't help but feel a little strange. He didn't feel anything special about this crack. It was just that there was some cold aura coming from below. This wasn't a big deal because the aura in the space below was colder than on the ground. "Go down!" Lin Tian now. He had been trapped in this world for more than 300 years. He could not use his cultivation, and his physical strength had become similar to that of an ordinary person. Under such circumstances, he chased after the old hoodlum to this place. The divine sword in his sea of consciousness suddenly trembled a few times because of this crack, causing him to be able to sense his sea of consciousness for a few moments. This made him a little excited. He was sure that there must be something unusual under this crack. Otherwise, it would be impossible for the divine sword in his sea of consciousness to tremble. As long as he found the thing that made the divine sword tremble, they might really be able to leave this world. "Go down? Down here?" The old gangster looked down at the bottomless crack and said with a frown, "Boy, it's hard to say how deep this crack is, but it's at least 10,000 feet deep. We've been suppressed to the level of an ordinary person, and even our physical bodies are not much stronger than an ordinary person. If we go down so deep, if we accidentally fall, we'll be in trouble. We'll probably be smashed into meat paste. At that time, even if we have an immortal body, we'll die. He glanced at Lin Tian, and then he looked down at the crack and continued. Besides that, the deeper we go, the lower the temperature will be. With our current cultivations, we're unable to utilize even a shred of it, so we won't be able to endure too low of a temperature. Cut the crap. Go down. Lin Tian now. As he spoke, he directly went down the crack. He naturally understood the old gangster's concerns. He knew that going down the crack was very dangerous for them now. If they were not careful, they might die. But even so, he couldn't back down. He had to go down and find the thing that made the divine sword in his sea of consciousness tremble. That might be their only hope of leaving this world. He didn't want to be trapped in this world forever. There were still many of his family and friends outside this world. He carefully went down the crack, and in the blink of an eye, he was already about 10 feet deep. The old gangster had a lot of concerns about going down the crack. But at this moment, seeing that Lin Tian had already begun to go down, he rolled his eyes and didn't stay on the ground alone. He also went down with Lin Tianyi. The two of them went down. In the blink of an eye, a quarter of an hour had passed, and 3,000 feet of distance was left over their heads. In the process of climbing down 3,000 feet, Lin Tian's hunting spear played a big role. Although the crack was very deep, it was only about 1 meter wide, and the hunting spear was about 2 meters long. From time to time, they could lean the hunting spear between the cracks and rest for a while. But even so, the process was still difficult for them. At one point, they felt their hands and legs go numb. The two of them stopped for a while and continued to go down. Soon, they were 3,000 feet deep. After going down this distance, a very troublesome problem arose. That was, the temperature of the air had become very low. For the two of them who were suppressed to the level of an ordinary person, it was really bad. Not only did it make their bodies feel very uncomfortable, but it also made it more difficult for them to go down. What a pain! The old gangster bared his teeth. Kid, if we can't find a way to leave this broken cage, this old man will bite you to death. Lin Tian was too lazy to pay attention to him. His movements were slow and careful as he continued to go down. The old gangster gritted his teeth and followed him down. The air became colder and colder. As they went deeper and deeper, the two of them only felt that they could be frozen at any time. In this regard, Lin Tian was somewhat helpless. The two of them were obviously powerful immortal level cultivators, but in this world, even withstanding such a low temperature was very uncomfortable. It was really a little depressing. Continue, he said to himself and continued to go down. As time passed, as he and the old gangster went deeper and deeper, the temperature became lower and lower, making them feel as if the blood in their bodies was about to be frozen. After another quarter of an hour, they climbed to the end of the crack. There was no road below, but they still couldn't see where the bottom was. However, when they reached the end of the crack, although the road was gone, there was a thick ancient tree that happened to grow at the end of the crack. There were many green vines on it, like a big snake. Both of them were powerful cultivators, so they were naturally not surprised by this scene. Lin Tian grabbed a vine and continued to go down along the top of the ancient tree. The old gangster followed him, also grabbing a vine, and went down along the ancient tree. After another quarter of an hour, they finally arrived at the bottom of the ground. As far as the eye could see, the underground world was somewhat vast, but it was dim. Among them, the lone mountains were connected to one another, and many places were surrounded by white fog. The air was very cold, so cold that it made the two of them shiver involuntarily. Lin Tian scanned his surroundings. In the blink of an eye, his gaze landed on a small tree beside the towering tree. The tree was filled with purple fruits. They were about the size of a fist, and there were quite a number of them. All of them had a purple luster to them. Purple wood-eaten fruit. Lin Tian's eyes were slightly cold. The purple woodine fruit was an extraordinary treasure of heaven and earth. Anyone below the golden immortal level who took a purple woodine fruit and refined it could raise their cultivation by a small level in a short time. There's actually such a thing here? The old hoodlum revealed a strange expression. It wasn't because of the purple woodine fruit itself, but because there was no spiritual energy, or immortal spiritual energy in the air in this prison of heaven and earth that could suppress even a god-emperor to the level of an ordinary person. It should have been impossible for any kind of heavenly treasure to grow. However, there was a purple woodine tree here, and there were many purple woodine fruits on it. This made him feel that something was off. Chapter 16:22. Looking in the southeast direction of the underground space, Lin Tian was surprised. Just now, when he sensed the vibration of the seven-colored divine sword in his sea of consciousness, he clearly sensed the aura of the sword's soul fragment in the southeast direction of this space. In this cage of heaven and earth, in this underground space, there was actually a sword's soul fragment. This surprised him, but at the same time, he couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. Previously, when the divine sword in his body vibrated several times, he could sense his sea of consciousness in an instant. When the divine sword emitted the seven-colored divine light, this feeling became even clearer. According to this reaction, if the divine sword was able to release enough seven-colored divine light to fill every corner of his body, it would definitely be able to produce an even greater change. He might be able to use this to directly break free from the suppression of this world and be able to use his own cultivation for a short period of time. Now, he sensed the aura of the sword's soul fragment in this underground space. According to the situation, every time he found the sword's soul fragment in the past, as long as he found the sword's soul fragment here and let it enter his body and merge with the divine sword at the bottom of his sea of consciousness, the divine sword would emit enough seven-colored divine light to fill every corner of his body. Thinking like this, he directly came to a conclusion. As long as he could find the sword's soul fragment in this underground space and integrate it into his body, there was a great possibility that he could break free from the suppression of this prison of heaven and earth in a short period of time. Then, he could use his cultivation again. And as long as he could use his cultivation, leaving this world would be as easy as flipping his hand. Immediately, he directly headed in the southeast direction of this underground space. He didn't even pick the purple woodine fruit in front of him. Because, no matter how extraordinary the purple woodine fruit was, it would only be useful to him if he could leave this world. Otherwise, it would just be an ordinary wild fruit. At this time, the most important thing was to quickly find the sword's soul fragment in this space and find the sword's soul fragment. After finding the sword's soul fragment and merging it with his body, if he could really break free from the suppression of this world for a short time as he guessed, it wouldn't be too late to return here to take all the purple woodine fruits. Then, he would return to the wooden house and leave this cage of heaven and earth with Wu Yi. The old gangster saw Lin Tian running towards the southeast of this space. Although he didn't know what Lin Tian had discovered, he still followed him all the way. Lin Tian's speed was very fast. Running in this underground world, he quickly ran far away from the ancient tree from before. Rumble! Suddenly, the ground shook, and the soil burst open. A giant centipede, about 10 feet long, crawled out from the ground. Its entire body was black, and it spat out a poisonous mist. It directly attacked Lin Tian. Lin Tianwei was shocked. Although this centipede did not have any demonic energy fluctuations, it was clearly much stronger than ordinary wild beasts. However, even so, even though he was suppressed to the level of an ordinary person, he was not afraid of it. He held the hunting spear in his hand and used it like a stick. With a powerful smash, it landed on the head of the giant centipede. With a bang, the giant centipede was directly smashed to the ground, and immediately stopped moving. After that, he continued to run towards the southeast, and the old gangster followed behind him all the way. After that, as they ran towards the southeast of this underground world, many wild beasts rushed out one after another. Although they did not have any demonic energy fluctuations, they were not ordinary wild beasts. They were all very powerful and ferocious. However, fortunately, these wild beasts did not rush out in groups at once. Therefore, it was not difficult for Lin Tian and the old gangster to deal with them. In the blink of an eye, more than 2 hours had passed. At this time, following the previous feeling, Lin Tian ran towards a group of short hills in this underground world. Once again, he felt the vibration of the divine sword in his sea of consciousness. This time, it was clearer than the previous few times. Then, after another quarter of an hour, he came to a canyon in the group of short hills. In a pit in front of him, a fist-sized colorful light source lay quietly, emitting strands of colorful light. Found it! Lin Tian was overjoyed. This fist-sized colorful light source was undoubtedly the fragment of the sword soul that he had been looking for. Behind him, the expression of the old gangster who followed him changed slightly. This thing. Looking at this colorful light source, he clearly felt a very powerful fluctuation of divine power. In this prison of heaven and earth, there was actually a light source that could emit fluctuations of divine power in this place. Moreover, he vaguely felt that the reason why this underground space without spiritual energy could grow the purple woodine tree, produce many purple woodine fruits, and the reason why the wild beasts in this underground space were many times more ferocious than ordinary wild beasts, seemed to be most directly related to this colorful light source. Thinking of this, he could not help but look at Lin Tian again, and a surprised expression appeared on his face. This kid, how did he sense the existence of such a godly source in this place? Looking at Lin Tian, he was a little surprised. When Lin Tian stopped on the ground, he said that he found something strange, and then he came all the way to this place. Obviously, when he was underground, he sensed the colorful light source in this place and found this place, which surprised him a little. Before seeing this colorful light source up close, he did not feel anything at all, because under the condition of being suppressed to an ordinary person, he could not use his divine sense, so he could not sense it at all, but Lin Tian sensed it. How did he sense it? Lin Tian was very excited when he saw this fragment of the sword soul. Without hesitation, he stepped directly next to the fragment of the sword soul. Immediately, the divine sword in his body vibrated again, more violently than before, causing the fragments of the seven-colored sword soul to emit strands of divine light, resonating with the seven-colored divine sword in his body. Then, in the next moment, the fist-sized fragment of the sword soul floated up on its own, completely unaffected by the prison of heaven and earth. Just like before, it slowly rotated around him, and then turned into a colorful light, which directly entered his body. Then, in the blink of an eye, this fragment of the sword soul arrived outside the colorful divine sword in his body. It paused outside the colorful divine sword for a moment, and then directly entered the colorful divine sword, causing the colorful divine sword to vibrate again. The sword was directly intertwined with a thick colorful light, and then from the bottom of his sea of consciousness, it spread to all parts of his body. In the blink of an eye, the colorful light filled every corner of his body, and even the light overflowed from the surface of his body. Immediately, his body trembled slightly, and a long-lost feeling surged in his heart. He clenched his fist slightly, and with a thought, the Heart Sutra of Sun was immediately activated. Then, with a boom, a golden divine light surged out, as if a golden flame was burning. It really works! He was surprised and delighted. Just as he had guessed before, at this time, he found the fragment of the sword soul in this underground space. As the fragment of the sword soul merged with the divine sword in his body, the colorful divine light filled his body, and he really did break free from the suppression of this world for a short time, and his cultivation of the genuine immortal level could be used again. Next to him, the old gangster was shocked, and his eyes almost popped out. Little boy, you. He couldn't even speak clearly. At this time, Lin Tian actually emitted a fluctuation of divine power on his own, and his suppressed cultivation was clearly able to be used again, which made the old gangster look as if he had seen a ghost. Lin Tian didn't care about the old gangster's surprise, and the light in his eyes became stronger. Thick, colorful divine light intertwined in his body. At this time, he didn't refine it, because his cultivation could only be used temporarily at this time, and he had to have the colorful divine light fill his body. "Let's go, old man!" He raised his hand and grabbed the old gangster. At this time, without any pause, he took a step forward and crossed an endless distance in an instant, and appeared next to the purple woodine tree from before. With a wave of his hand, all the purple woodine fruits on the tree, along with the purple woodine tree itself, were taken into his body. Then, he grabbed the old gangster and rushed out of the underground space, turned into a human-shaped lightning, and rushed toward the wooden house. Now, the colorful divine light from the divine sword in his sea of consciousness filled his body, allowing him to break free from the suppression of this world for a short time. He didn't know how long this situation could last, so he had to return to Wu Yi's side as soon as possible, and then leave this world with Wu Yi. He was very fast, and it didn't take him long to arrive at the wooden house he built. At this time, Wu Yi was sitting at the round wooden table in front of the wooden house. When he saw Lin Tian rush back here, and saw the golden divine light around Lin Tian's body, a strange light appeared in his eyes. Obviously, he could see that Lin Tian had broken free from the suppression of this world at this time, and his suppressed cultivation could be used again. "Wu Yi, let's leave now!" Lin Tian came to Wu Yi's side. At this time, he didn't have time to explain to Wu Yi how he broke free from the suppression of this world, and directly punched into the sky. The powerful divine power turned into a golden fist light, and pierced through the vast sky, revealing a circular space tunnel. Wu Yi looked at the space tunnel that Lin Tian blasted open in the sky, and then turned to look at the wooden house in this place. There was a faint light in his calm eyes. "What's wrong?" Lin Tian asked. Wu Yi looked away and shook his head gently. "Then let's go." Lin Tian now. "Go, go, go! Let's go quickly!" The old hooligan was grabbed by Lin Tianyi, and he stared at the space tunnel that Lin Tian blasted open. At this time, he shouted loudly, and he was even more excited than Lin Tian. Lin Tian didn't say much. He grabbed the old hooligan and wrapped Wu Yi in the golden divine light, and then turned into a divine light, directly rushing into the space tunnel that he blasted open. Darkness instantly covered their vision. Then, after an unknown period of time, a trace of light appeared in the dark vision. He led Wu Yi and the old hooligan through the vast darkness, and stepped out of the space tunnel. As far as the eye could see, there were huge stars all around, and there was silver starlight everywhere. They were in the starry sky. "We're out!" Chapter 16:23. The stars were connected to one another, and they were terrifyingly huge. Silver starlight intertwined around them, making them appear dull yet beautiful. Lin Tian was pleasantly surprised and excited. He had been trapped in the prison of heaven and earth for over 300 years, and now he had finally walked out. "I'm out, I'm out! I'm finally out! I'm finally out!" the old hoodlum shouted excitedly. Only Wu Yi remained very quiet. There was no trace of joy after escaping, and he was like the surface of a still spring. "Kid! Not bad! Not bad! Ha 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 ha!" The old hoodlum laughed excitedly and patted Lin Tian's shoulder. "As expected of the person I've chosen, you're really not bad. Not bad at all." He didn't know how many years it had been since he was trapped in the heaven and earth cage. Now that he was able to escape from that world because of Lin Tian, he was extremely excited to be able to use his cultivation again. Lin Tian pushed the old hoodlum's hand away. "Who wants to be chosen by an old man? Go back to wherever it's cool." The old hoodlum was still laughing. I know. You want to be chosen by the little girl next to you, and you're complaining that I'm interfering with your time alone. Don't worry, I'll leave right away." As he spoke, he ignored Lin Tian's angry glare. He waved his right hand, and a divine talisman formed from divine light appeared. He stuffed it directly into Lin Tian's hand. "I owe you a big favor. If you encounter any trouble in the future, crush this divine talisman. Even if I'm at the end of the world, I'll immediately rush over to help you." As he finished speaking, he patted Lin Tian's shoulder a few more times. Then, he turned into a streak of divine light and disappeared into the starry sky. Only the sound of teeth-grinding laughter could be heard from afar. King of Chaos, Sakura, just you wait. You two old things work together to trick me, and I'll kill you too. Lin Tian looked at the divine talisman left by the old hoodlum in his hand. He sensed the aura that the old hoodlum exuded, and he couldn't help but be moved. This aura was powerful yet hazy, and he couldn't see through it at all. Wu-Yi, can you see through that old man's cultivation? He asked Wu-Yi. Wu-Yi nodded and said softly, Peak God Emperor. Lin Tian's hand that was holding the divine talisman immediately trembled, and his body couldn't help but tremble. Peak God Emperor? He revealed a shocked expression. When he was in the Wushang domain, he had only heard the old hooligan mention that he had been trapped in that world for close to 1,000,000 years, and had never asked about the other party's cultivation. But who would have thought that this unscrupulous and scoundrel old fellow's cultivation was actually so strong, to actually be at the peak divine lord? This was the pinnacle of the path of cultivation that he knew of. Looking at the direction in which the old hooligan left, he couldn't help but feel a chill run down his spine. This old hooligan was actually that terrifying. Then, he looked at the talisman left by the old hooligan in his hand and carefully put it away. This was an ultimate killing weapon that could summon a peak divine lord. With this plaything in the future, when he met the true bodies of existences like Taishang and King of Hell, he reckoned that he wouldn't even need to use Xiao Xiao. The starry sky was dim, and the stars were connected to each other. After the old hooligan left, only Lin Tian and Wu-Yi were left here. The atmosphere instantly became very quiet. Lin Tian looked at Wu-Yi beside him, feeling a little awkward. After all, a few days ago, the old hooligan had said in front of Wu-Yi that his eyes were filled with feelings for Wu-Yi. Now that he was alone with Wu-Yi, he couldn't help but feel a little awkward. However, this awkwardness didn't last long, and he quickly calmed himself down. Wu-Yi, where are we going now? He asked. Wu-Yi looked at the starry sky in front of her, paused, and said, Let's walk around and then go back. Okay. Lin Tian nodded. Naturally, he understood Wu-Yi's meaning. She wanted to walk around the starry sky and then go back to the 10-direction sky domain. In fact, he also wanted to go back to the 10-direction sky domain. After all, he had left the 10-direction sky domain for too long. Immediately, the two of them walked slowly in a certain direction. Wu-Yi was very quiet. She followed beside him, moving forward with his footsteps, occasionally glancing at the stars around them. By the way, Wu-Yi, back in the Immortal Region's Extreme Temple, was the ancestral art you used a pure divine ability? Or was it a law? Lin Tian asked Wu-Yi. He knew that if he didn't speak, Wu-Yi definitely wouldn't speak. At the same time, he really wanted to know the answer to this question. After all, the ancestral art Wu-Yi used back then was really terrifying. It could actually defeat all the forces of Extreme Temple and Ambush Arrow Palace that Ambush Arrow King had mobilized. That was equivalent to killing a half-step divine emperor in an instant. Wu-Yi shook his head. Order? Order? What's that? Lin Tianwei was puzzled. Wu-Yi paused, then said softly, Right now you're still very far away from it. If you understand it in advance, it may affect your future cultivation. Clearly, just like how she didn't tell Lin Tian what the nameless law of Tao was, she didn't intend to tell Lin Tian what order was in advance either. For cultivators, it wasn't a good thing to know about things that were far beyond their current cultivation level in advance. Lin Tian sweated, but didn't pursue the matter. He paused for a moment, then looked at Wu-Yi with a smile. Are you used to speaking like this now? Wu-Yi had already recovered his normal cultivation after escaping from the heaven and earth prison. However, he didn't use his divine sense to speak so much. Wu-Yi tilted her head and looked at him. Not good? No, it's pretty good, Lin Tian said with a smile. Although the divine sense voice is also very pleasant to hear, it's even better now. Habit was a special kind of power. During the days when he was trapped in the wantless sky domain, he couldn't use his cultivation. Wu Yi had always been speaking like an ordinary person. After more than 300 years, he had already gotten used to this way of speaking. He and Wu Yi walked in the starry sky, looking at the stars in the sky. From time to time, he would find something to talk about with Wu Yi. Is what you said true? The Yuan clan captured a nine-tailed fox in the starry sky? She has already won 79 battles in a row in the Emperor Battle Arena? She even defeated a half-step immortal level ferocious beast? Of course. I personally went to the Emperor Battle Arena to see it once. Not only is she very powerful, but she's also very beautiful. Oh, a nine-tailed fox is very rare. According to what you said, not only can she defeat a half-step immortal level ferocious beast, but she's also very beautiful. Perhaps it's really worth going to see. 5 middle-aged men appeared in the distance. Their cultivation levels were all in the Emperor realm. They walked into the distance while talking. Lin Tian and Wu Yi walked side by side in the starry sky. They were very far away from the 5 middle-aged men. However, they still heard their conversation and couldn't help but frown. Wu Yi, wait for me here, he said to Wu Yi and walked towards the 5 middle-aged men. Up until now, he had taken in 2 disciples. His first disciple, Yi Tong, was from the human race and had the divine sun eye. His second disciple, Tu Xianxian, was from the fox race. Although he didn't have any special bloodline, his aptitude was extremely shocking, comparable to the monarch body. Now, as he traveled through the starry sky with Wu Yi, he suddenly heard a few cultivators talking. The main topic of discussion was a nine-tailed fox, who was of the same race as his second disciple. He naturally couldn't help but pay some attention to it. His speed was extremely fast. In just a single step, he appeared in front of the 5 middle-aged men in the next moment. Who is it? Seeing Lin Tian suddenly appear in front of them, the 5 middle-aged men all frowned. At the same time, they were a little surprised because they didn't see how Lin Tian walked in front of them. Fellow Taoists, please relax. I don't mean any harm. I just happened to overhear your conversation and want to know more about the nine-tailed fox. Lin Tian now looked at one of the middle-aged men in yellow robes and said, I wonder if you can show us the nine-tailed fox's appearance? The middle-aged man in yellow robes was the one who claimed that he had seen the nine-tailed fox once. When he heard Lin Tian's words, he was slightly stunned and then couldn't help but smile. It seems that fellow Taoist is very interested in the nine-tailed fox's appearance. This is also very normal. After all, the fox clan is naturally charming, not to mention that it can grow into a nine-tailed fox. To be honest, in the Emperor Battle Arena, some eternal level big shots were moved by it. Some big shots even wanted to exchange for the nine-tailed fox with the Yuan family, but they were all rejected by the Yuan family. As he said that, the yellow-robed middle-aged man raised his right hand slightly, and directly pulled out a divine sense engraving, showing a young girl with 9 fox tails. Her appearance was beautiful, and her figure was also very graceful, but her limbs were shackled, and her body was stained with a lot of blood. She was currently on a vast and sturdy arena, fighting barehanded with a violent, fierce beast. There were many cultivators watching from the surroundings of the arena, and from time to time, there would be people who would let out excited shouts. This is the nine-tailed fox, how is it, not bad, right? The middle-aged man in yellow robes smiled as if he was showing off something. Next to him, the other 4 middle-aged men saw the content of the divine sense imprint, and couldn't help but show some excitement. Yes, she is indeed very beautiful. Her fighting posture is also really good, and her moves seem to be very extraordinary. It is indeed worth watching. No wonder the Yuan family would refuse to exchange for this nine-tailed fox. With this nine-tailed fox's appearance and fighting posture, the Yuan family's Emperor Battle Arena will definitely attract a lot of powerhouses to watch. In a very short time, the Yuan family will be able to collect a very considerable cultivation wealth for the Yuan family, several people said. It was also at this time that a terrifying chill emerged from the side. Lin Tian looked at the divine sense imprint of the middle-aged man in yellow robes, and a piercing killing intent immediately spread out. The nine-tailed girl in it was clearly his second disciple, Tu Xianxian. Where is the Emperor Battle Arena? he asked the middle-aged man in yellow robes in a cold voice. He didn't know when his second disciple grew to the nine-tailed realm, and he didn't know how she was caught by the Yuan family. The only thing he knew was that his second disciple's current situation was very bad. She was cruelly used as a fighting beast for other cultivators to watch and collect cultivation wealth. Facing Lin Tian's killing intent, the middle-aged man in yellow robes and the other 4 middle-aged men were all shocked and couldn't help but tremble. The 5 of them were only at the Emperor realm, and now facing the killing intent of Lin Tian, who was at the true immortal realm, they only felt that their souls were about to crack. You! The middle-aged man in yellow robes trembled all over, and at this time, his face was pale. Chapter 16:24. Facing Lin Tian's murderous eyes at close range, the yellow-robed middle-aged man almost fainted. His eyes were filled with fear, and he didn't dare to hide anything. He immediately told him everything he knew about the Yuan family's Emperor Arena. Lin Tianyi shook off the yellow-robed middle-aged man, took a step forward, and instantly returned to Wu Yi's side. "Let's go to the vast cloud ancient star," he said to Wu Yi. From the yellow-robed middle-aged man, he learned that the Yuan family's monarch battle arena where Tu Xianxian was imprisoned was located in the vast cloud ancient star, the central imperial star of the vast cloud ancient star area. It was the 5th most powerful star in the universe. At this time, he and Wu Yi happened to be in the vast cloud ancient star field, not far from the center of the ancient star field. Wu Yi heard the conversation between the yellow-robed middle-aged man and the others, and also saw Lin Tian's reaction. Although he didn't know who the 9-tailed girl in the yellow-robed middle-aged man was, he could see that she had a close relationship with Lin Tian. Otherwise, Lin Tian wouldn't show such a strong murderous intent now. Immediately, he and Lin Tian went to the vast cloud ancient star. Both of their cultivations were very powerful, and their speed was faster than lightning. In an instant, they disappeared on the spot. Looking at the figures of Lin Tian and Wu Yi, the yellow-robed middle-aged man and the others were all trembling. Just now, the murderous intent emitted by Lin Tian was too terrifying, and they didn't dare to move. Especially the yellow-robed middle-aged man, his whole body almost went limp. Vast cloud ancient star, Night Sky City. Night Sky City was vast and huge. For the cultivators on the vast cloud ancient star, almost everyone knew it because this was the ancient city built by the Yuan family, the number 1 force on the vast cloud ancient star. There was a Yuan family's beast arena in it. The beast battle arena was called the Emperor Battle Arena. Even the weakest vicious beast in it was at the Emperor rank. They were captured by the Yuan clan from all over the world for the cultivators to watch. Its basic nature was not much different from the prison battle arena of the mortal world. They were both places filled with blood. At this moment, on an enormous battle platform in the Emperor Battle Arena, a delicate young woman with 9 tails was in battle with an ape devil that was an entire 100 m tall, and it caused the crowd of cultivators outside the battle platform to frequently emit excited shouts. These cultivators couldn't be considered weak, and all of them had thick blood qi. Since they'd started cultivating until now, they'd seen many bloody battles between demonic beasts, as well as battles between demonic beasts and humans. However, the feeling they got from watching these battles was different from watching them in the Emperor Battle Arena. Especially at this moment, when they saw a charming fox girl in a bloody battle with an enormous ferocious beast, many people felt excited and novel. This fox girl's battle prowess isn't bad. Her beauty is also exceptional. If I were to tame her in bed, coupled with the fox race's innate charm, the feeling would be, heh! In a pavilion not far from the battle platform, a blue-robed middle-aged man looked at the 9-tailed girl on the battle platform with a lustful look in his eyes. Even so, don't mess around. This was captured by a big shot of the main clan by chance from the starry sky. Now, she's already the most outstanding battle slave in the Emperor Battle Arena. In just a few dozen days, she's collected a huge amount of cultivation resources for the clan. If you mess around, I'm afraid it'll affect her battle prowess and ruin the Emperor Battle Arena's business. We can't afford to take responsibility. Next to him, a brown-robed middle-aged man said so, but his eyes had the same lustful look as the blue-robed middle-aged man. Boom! Roar! In the battle platform, demonic light surged and the ape's roar shook the sky, shaking the entire battle platform as if it would collapse in the next moment. However, it was very difficult to collapse because it was engraved with Tao patterns and array seals. Divine power below the eternal level couldn't damage it at all. At the same time, the battle platform was enveloped by a very powerful eternal level light curtain, isolating the battle platform from the spectating cultivators. The bloody battle inside the battle platform couldn't affect the spectating cultivators outside the battle platform. On the battle platform, the nine-tailed girl's body was stained with blood. There was a hint of fatigue on her delicate face. For the past few months, she had been forced to fight day and night in the Emperor battle arena. Her essence, chi, and spirit had been severely depleted. It was useless to resist. The shackles on her limbs had a special technique that she couldn't resist with her current cultivation base. Roar! The ape demon roared ferociously and bloodthirstily. It was comparable to a half-step to immortal realm human cultivator. The girl was at the middle stage of Emperor realm. Her demonic light was pure and her techniques were extraordinary. However, at this moment, she gradually became a little embarrassed when facing this powerful ape demon. She was sent flying by the ape demon several times, blood flowing from her mouth and nose. This fox girl can't hold on any longer. After all, this ape demon isn't simple. It's much stronger than ordinary half-step to immortal realm ferocious beasts. The fox girl has already defeated 2 half-step to immortal realm ferocious beasts in a row. Her essence and demonic energy have been greatly depleted. The Yuan family directly released another half-step to immortal realm ferocious beast, and it's several times more ferocious than the previous 2. It looks like the outcome won't be good. Many cultivators discussed. At the same time, in a pavilion not far from the battle platform, the blue-clothed middle-aged man and the brown-clothed middle-aged man who were in charge of the Emperor battle arena had ugly expressions. The nine-tailed girl was their Emperor battle arena's most outstanding battle slave. Every day, she could gather a considerable amount of cultivation wealth for the Emperor battle arena. If she died now, the Emperor battle arena would suffer a great loss. Damn it! Let me win! The blue-clothed middle-aged man stared at the nine-tailed girl and clenched his fist tightly. According to the rules of the Emperor battle arena, once the prisoner battle started, it couldn't be stopped unless one party died. Even if they were the owners of the Emperor battle arena, it would affect the reputation of the Emperor battle arena. At this moment, he was somewhat regretful that in order to satisfy the excitement of the spectating cultivators, the nine-tailed girl had already defeated 2 half-step immortal rank ferocious beasts in a row, and then he continued to put in a half-step immortal rank ape devil. Roar! On the Emperor battle arena, the ape demon roared ferociously. The nine-tailed girl was sent flying again and again by the ape demon. As time passed, her essence, chi, and spirit had weakened to the lowest point. Live. I have to live. Before I spread my master's faith across the starry sky, I can't die. The girl muttered to herself. Her voice was extremely weak. After being sent flying by the ape demon, she fell into a pool of blood and struggled to stand up. However, she couldn't do so for a long time. Roar! The ape demon was ferocious and wouldn't show any mercy. Its vast and surging demonic energy rushed towards the girl like a flood. She can't even stand up. She's dead for sure. Outside the battle arena, many cultivators said. However, they didn't have the slightest bit of sympathy. Instead, their faces were filled with excitement. The light in their eyes became brighter as they stared at the battle arena, waiting for the moment the ape demon smashed the girl into pieces. The next moment, the ape demon rushed towards the girl. Its beast eyes were filled with bloodlust as its black beast claws viciously slammed towards the girl. Such a violent attack was undoubtedly devastating to the nine-tailed girl who was lying in a pool of blood. Clang! At this moment, the clanging of swords resounded. A glaring sword ray streaked across from afar. It was as if an otherworldly sword had descended and instantly shattered the defensive light barrier outside the battle arena. It directly shattered the ape demon into pieces. The entire battle arena was torn apart. Smoke and dust lingered on the shattered battle arena. At this moment, two figures appeared. Lin Tian had arrived with Wu Yi. When he saw the nine-tailed girl who was struggling in a pool of blood on the battle arena, he took a step forward and came to her side. Gentle golden divine energy immediately surged out and enveloped the girl, causing her injuries to heal quickly. The girl's beautiful face was stained with blood. Her eyelids moved and her gaze fell on Lin Tian. Although her vision was blurred, she could still make out Lin Tian's appearance. She immediately trembled. Master, it's okay. Master is here. Lin Tian comforted her. The nine-tailed girl who was covered in blood was his second disciple on earth, Tu Xianxian from the Green Hill Fox clan. He shattered the shackles on Tu Xianxian's limbs. Gentle golden divine energy surged into Tu Xianxian's body even more violently, healing Tu Xianxian's injuries even faster. Chapter 1625. The chilling killing intent surged and shrouded the entire Emperor battle arena. That aura made everyone's heart tremble. Who is he? Seeing the sudden appearance of Lin Tian and Wu Yi in the battle arena, and sensing the killing intent emitted by Lin Tian, all the cultivators felt their souls turn cold. Moreover, they could not help but guess that the slash just now was made by Lin Tian. That slash had actually pierced through the eternal light screen outside the battle arena and crushed the half-step immortal rank ape devil on the battle arena. Then, the battle arena covered with eternal Tao patterns was split into pieces and dust filled the air. How terrifying was that? He and that fox girl. Seeing Lin Tian kill the ape devil and help Tu Xianxian up from the pool of blood to treat his wounds, everyone was shocked. Obviously, they could see that Lin Tian and Tu Xianxian were related. Lin Tian half-squatted and held Tu Xianxian's shoulder. His other hand was constantly pouring divine energy into Tu Xianxian's body. At close range, he saw that Tu Xianxian's body was full of bloody scars. The shackles on his limbs had sharp thorns that pierced through Tu Xianxian's limbs. At this moment, there were still bloody holes on his wrists and hands. There was a faint remnant of Tao power in Tu Xianxian's body, binding his soul. Moreover, the fact that Tu Xianxian had been maintaining the appearance of her 9 tails at this time was also related to this Tao energy. Someone was forcefully controlling her using the Tao energy that bound her divine soul, causing Tu Xianxian to constantly reveal her 9 tails, making Tu Xianxian's prison battle appear even more attractive. For a moment, the killing intent emitted by him became even more intense. Even the sky in this area could not help but rumble. Back then on Earth, when the little girl acted shamelessly in front of him, she proudly flashed her furry tail for him to touch. She was playful and quick-witted, and she treasured her tail very much. But now, someone deliberately forced the little girl to reveal her 9 foxtails with a special force, forcing the little girl to maintain this posture to attract the spectating cultivators and to collect cultivation wealth. Whoosh! Whoosh! 2 air-piercing sounds rang out. The blue-clothed middle-aged man and the brown-clothed middle-aged man, who had been in the distant pavilion, flashed over. The 2 of us are in charge of the Yuan clan's Emperor battle arena. Who are you? Is it related to this Dou slave of my race? The blue-clothed youth asked Lin Tian now with a cautious expression. After all, someone who could destroy the eternal level light screen outside the battle platform with a single blow was definitely not a simple person. He should have the strength of an eternal level expert. Moreover, the killing intent that Lin Tian exuded was very frightening. Therefore, even though he was a member of the Yuan family, which had the strongest inheritance in this world, and even though his Yuan family ancestor had reached the true immortal realm, he did not dare to show the slightest bit of arrogance when facing Lin Tian. Boom! An ear-piercing thunder reverberated. 2 silver lightning bolts descended from the sky almost the instant the blue-clothed, middle-aged man finished speaking. They directly covered the blue-clothed, middle-aged man and the brown-clothed, middle-aged man beside him. both of their bodies and souls were destroyed on the spot. Such a scene shocked all the cultivators in the Emperor Arena to the point of trembling. The two main figures in charge of the Emperor Battle Arena of the Yuan family, who had the cultivation of the immortal realm, were killed in an instant. Many people looked at Lin Tian and could not help but feel a chill run down their spines. Naturally, they could guess that it was Lin Tian who did it. At the same time, the other disciples of the Yuan family in the Emperor Battle Arena trembled and revealed a look of horror. It was also at this time that Tu Xianxian, who was supported by Lin Tian, recovered from most of her injuries. Her dazed consciousness was also completely restored. Looking at Lin Tian, who was right in front of her, her body trembled slightly. She tugged at Lin Tian's clothes and choked with tears. Master! Captured and imprisoned by the Yuan family, she had to fight fiercely with many ferocious beasts. This situation had lasted for dozens of days. During the process, she had been seriously injured many times, but she had never shown a trace of weakness. However, at this time, when she saw Lin Tian in front of her, she immediately burst into tears like a child who had been wronged. Don't cry. Lin Tian comforted her. I'll make them pay you back 1,000 times over for all the grievances they've caused you. When he arrived at the Emperor Battle Arena, he saw that the little fox could barely stand up, but when she faced the ape devil's attack, she didn't show the slightest bit of fear. She was even muttering to herself that she would spread his faith throughout the galaxy. He could even imagine that the little fox had entered the galaxy to preach for him, only to be discovered and captured by the Yuan family. Such a strong disciple who was so considerate of him was originally the proud little princess of the Green Hill Fox clan. She was usually witty and quick-witted, and stepped into the cosmos to preach for him. However, she was captured by the Yuan family and forced to wear shackles of Tao power. She fought fiercely with ferocious beasts in this enormous Emperor Battle Arena to satisfy the wicked tastes of the cultivators and accumulate cultivation wealth. Now that she saw him, she was choking with tears like a child. This was unbearable for him. Boom! With the activation of the 5 heaven-shaking lightning technique, rolling thunder resounded through the sky. In the sky, pitch-black clouds quickly gathered, with bolts of silver lightning circling around them. It was as if silver lightning dragons were roaring in the clouds. In the next moment, bolts of silver lightning struck down from the heavens. In the blink of an eye, the entire Emperor Battle Arena was split into pieces, turning it into ruins in an instant. During this process, he consciously controlled the power of the silver lightning and didn't kill the other cultivators. After all, even if he was filled with anger and killing intent because the little fox was bullied, he couldn't kill all the cultivators in the Emperor Battle Arena. The cultivators in the dilapidated Emperor Battle Arena were horrified. The silver lightning that struck down just now was too terrifying. It had split the enormous Emperor Battle Arena, which was covered in eternal runes, into pieces in an instant. Just how powerful was it to accomplish this? Tu Xianxian's injuries had completely healed by now. Lin Tian had wiped away the bloodstains on his body with his divine power, and he stood up with Lin Tian's help. I'm sorry, Master. Xianxian has embarrassed you by being captured and brought to this place for everyone to admire like a war slave. She wiped away her tears, still choking with sobs. Her tattered clothes were restored to their original state, and the 9 furry tails behind her were tucked away. Lin Tian rubbed her head and smiled. It's nothing. Don't think too much about it. Little Fox has always been a lovely disciple that I'm proud of. Although he was comforting Tu Xianxian, there was not a trace of falsehood in his words. The little fox had only cultivated for 400 years, but she'd already reached mid-stage Emperor Void Realm and could kill half-step Immortal Realm cultivators. When she was about to die, the little girl's mind wasn't filled with fear of death, but with the thought of passing on the Tao to him. How could he not be proud of such a disciple? How could she not be cute? Really? Tu Xianxian choked with sobs. Really? Lin Tian said with a smile. Tu Xianxian wiped away his tears a few more times. His mood improved a little, and then he noticed Wu Yi next to him. So beautiful. Looking at the white-robed Wu Yi, he suddenly felt like he was looking at the Empyrean goddess. Her beauty made even the charming nine-tailed fox's heart flutter. "This is Master's friend, Wu Yi. Just call me Martial Uncle." Lin Tian introduced Tu Xianxian to Wu Yi, then looked at Wu Yi and introduced Tu Xianxian to Wu Yi. "Hello, Martial Uncle." Tu Xianxian bowed to Wu Yi. "Hello?" Wu Yi nodded and replied. At this time, Lin Tian looked at Tu Xianxian. Ignoring the cultivators who were looking at them in shock in the dilapidated Emperor battle arena, he asked Tu Xianxian, "When did you enter the starry sky? That stupid tiger and Qinlin aren't with you." The stupid tiger he mentioned was naturally the white tiger that was suppressed under Longhu Mountain. Qinlin was the descendant of an old man on Earth who adopted him. When he left, Tu Xianxian was in charge of the immortal court on Earth. The white tiger and Qinlin assisted Tu Xianxian. Now that he saw Tu Xianxian here, but not the white tiger and Qinlin, he was a little puzzled. Tu Xianxian said, "Xianxian and the stupid tiger entered the starry sky to preach Tao more than 100 years ago. Some time ago, they encountered a storm in the starry sky and were separated. Xianxian doesn't know where the stupid tiger is now." She continued, "As for Sister Qinlin, because her cultivation is a little lacking, she can't enter the starry sky. Therefore, she stayed on Earth and is in charge of the immortal court on Earth." Lin Tianwei nodded slightly and understood. He wasn't worried about the white tiger's safety. This was because the starry sky storm was different from the starry sky tide. Although the starry sky storm could sweep creatures far away from their original location and even across the starry sky, it wouldn't pose any threat to the creatures involved. In addition, the white tiger's bloodline was extraordinary. Therefore, nothing would happen to it. He paused for a moment, then looked at the many cultivators in the dilapidated Emperor battle arena. He directly grabbed one of them and said coldly, "Where is the Yuan clan's land?" His disciple was treated like this by the Yuan clan. He couldn't just let it go. Destroying the Emperor battle arena was nothing, but he wanted the Yuan clan to pay a heavier price. The cultivation of the person he grabbed was not bad. He was at the early stage of the immortal realm. However, when he met Lin Tian's cold eyes, he felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't dare to hide anything and told Lin Tian where the Yuan clan was established at the fastest speed. He also told him everything he knew about the Yuan clan. He was afraid that Lin Tian wouldn't be satisfied and kill him directly. Lin Tian threw this person away and said goodbye to Wu Yi. Then, he called Tu Xianxian and went straight to the Yuan clan's land. At this place, many cultivators couldn't help but tremble when they saw him and Tu Xianxian leaving with Wu Yi. Are they going to attack the Yuan clan? The Yuan clan has a patriarch at the true immortal realm. He looks very powerful, but he can't compete with a true immortal realm expert, can he? Isn't he courting death? These cultivators discussed. I don't think so. A black-robed old man at the peak of the immortal realm said. He glanced at the early stage of the immortal realm cultivator who was grabbed by Lin Tian and said, when he learned about the Yuan clan's land, he also learned some other things about the Yuan clan, including that they have a true immortal patriarch. After knowing this, he still went to the Yuan clan without hesitation. His expression didn't change at all. Obviously, he's not afraid of the true immortal of the Yuan clan. Many cultivators were shocked when they heard this. You mean that person, he's not weaker than a true immortal? Obviously, this is very likely. The black-robed old man said in a deep voice. The moment these words were spoken, the expressions of all the cultivators changed. Many of them couldn't help but tremble. I'm afraid the Yuan clan is in big trouble. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.